and Penguin Random House present this unabridged recording of
The Place on Dalhousie, written by Melina Marchetta, narrated by Maria Angelico. For Brenda, because I love being a supermodel with you. Part 1. When Rosie met Jim. Chapter 1. It's rained for 40 days and 40 nights, so when a guy who looks like Jesus in orange SES overalls comes to stand next to her, Rosie thinks it's all a bit biblical. Up on the meat raffle stage, the pot-bellied chief of emergency services is trying to get a word in. He's just mentioned the words forced evacuation, and the whole place is in an uproar. Some old bloke yells out that the Dawson threatens to flood every year and it's nothing to get their knickers in a twist about. The mayor is pushing for evacuation. Kev and his people aren't putting their lives at risk for you stubborn mongrels. He's shouting over everyone. Move out over the low-lying areas now or you'll be cut off for at least a week. Rosie feels SES Jesus' stare and she makes eye contact. He's a bit older than her, but not that much. Mid-20s maybe? Or younger. But he seems like he's been around. Jim, he says. Crazy eyes. A lunatic. Always the lunatics. Rosie. For Rosemary? Rosanna. There's a whole lot of shoving around them. On any given night, the Royal gets half a dozen patrons, mostly old-timers. But tonight it's packed, and no one wants to leave because Maeve, from the news agencies, brought along sandwiches and sausage rolls. SES Jesus' stare is intense. You're pretty. Rosie wants to hear something more original than that, but she lets him buy her a beer. What else is there to do but to hear stories about the last big flood of 74 from some of the old blokes who haven't spoken about anything interesting since? And that's all it takes. A couple of drinks and she's back in some strange guy's room upstairs at the pub. His calloused fingers find their way between her legs and she realises that she's going to spend another night of her life screwing a guy she doesn't know. Makes her feel as if she can't climb out of the back cave and the bleakness is smothering. You're going to have to stop doing that, she hears him say, and Rosie realises that she's crying. He mutters something, but she doesn't catch what it is. Prick teaser, bitch. Luke had an arsenal when it came to name-calling. The guy on top of her, Jim, she remembers, falls back beside her. She can hear his ragged breathing. Wonders how much time she'll let pass before she climbs out of his bed. The walls are paper-thin, and she can hear the muffled sounds of two people having it off next door. She makes her move. Stay, he says. It's with a sigh. One of empathy. And she hasn't felt anything close to that for a long time. She turns to face him in the dark. Feels the tickle of his beard every time he takes a breath. The lovers next door are at it. Rosie already knows their names because Stace needs to articulate in the third person everything she wants Roger to do to her. Go to sleep, Jim murmurs. While that's going on? It'll be over in less than a minute, tops. I've listened to this 4 nights in a row. Roger takes about 10 seconds to come. A moment later, there's silence from next door. Told ya. Rosie chuckles and he laughs, a warm sound. He's gone when she wakes up in the morning, and she's relieved they don't have to do the polite stuff. Outside, it's drizzling and steaming and her t-shirt's pasted to her with grime that comes from humidity and sweat. A couple of utes and 4-wheel drives pass by, packed with possessions being taken to higher ground. Rosie wonders if she's left it too late to get out of this town. Wishes Luke was here. Realises she hasn't missed him at all. But he would have been someone to make a decision with. She's been in this town for 5 weeks now. According to the Tidy Town sign out on the highway, there are 970 people living here. All whingers in her eyes. Those she's met, anyway. Rosie hasn't made a friend the whole time, so she has no idea what to do when a flood is on the forecast, except for what she heard last night from SES Jesus. At the cenotaph, one of the RSL guys is removing the wreaths, probably as a precaution. She's never been into the whole Anzac thing, so it surprises her that she's memorised the 26 men who have died in wars since 1914. The names that stick out most are the O'Hallorans. They make up 18 of the dead, and she wonders how many of them are left. She's the last Gennaro of her family, and the second last on her mother's side. When Rosie and her nonna Eugenia die, there'll be none of them left. So much for big Italian families. She crosses a low-lying bridge that takes her over the river and out to the old Simpson Road that backs onto the gully. There are half a dozen properties out here. It's where she's been living since Luke did a runner last week. When they first arrived in town, she found a job looking after someone who just had a hip replacement. Rosie hasn't got any qualifications, but she does the housework, feeds the chooks, cooks, and buys the old woman beer. There's no love lost between her and Joy Fricker, but Luke's departing gift was also nicking off with the money she had saved. So if Rosie wants to get out of this town sometime soon, she doesn't have much choice. On the Fricker property, she can feel the dampness on the grass. It's too much water to have come from the morning drizzle, so she wonders if it's already an overflow from the river. The house is an old 2-story Queenslander on stumps about 70 centimetres above the ground, so Rosie's hoping it'll keep them dry. Still in the same clothes from yesterday, the ironically named Joy is sitting on the veranda. She wears 80 years of bitterness on a lower lip that hangs down in a constant bag of sourness. Rosie ignores her and walks into the kitchen to fix breakfast. She whistles for Bruno, but there's no bark of acknowledgement. "Where's my dog?" she calls out. Miss Fricker's followed her inside. "Made a nuisance of himself, so I had to tie him up, didn't I?" Rosie bristles but holds her tongue, wants to tell the old woman that if she's strong enough to tie up a Kelpie Border Collie cross, then she can clean up after herself. They eat in silence before she goes to run Miss Fricker's bath, but nothing comes out. Last night, the head of emergency services was worried the lines would go underwater, so she figures they've cut the power. Most properties have a generator that kicks in, but no one's looked in on Miss Fricker since Rosie arrived, so she can't imagine a flood plan's in place. She spends the morning with SES Jesus's instructions in her head, because he was a talker and he didn't shut up the whole night. Removes anything she can off the floor in the living room and kitchen. The cane armchairs, the rug, baskets and vases. The furniture she's able to lift, she piles onto the table. In the kitchen, she grabs some of the china that looks sentimental and packs it away in a box with the photos on the mantelpiece before taking it upstairs into the spare bedroom. Miss Fricker watches the whole time, her eyes suspicious. Once or twice, Rosie hears Bruno barking and peers outside. But it's not until early afternoon that she's alarmed to see water almost up to the chicken coop, about 10 metres from the back steps of the house. "We need to get to the evacuation centre in town," she tells Miss Fricker. "I'm not going anywhere." "We can't stay here, Joy. We could be cut off for days. This is just a way of getting me out of my house and sticking me in that nursing home." It's all Rosie's heard for weeks because Joy Fricker's nephews are pricks, dying to get their hands on the property to sell. The problem for the Fricker boys is that their aunt still has her wits and isn't going to sign anything over to them. But Rosie doesn't give a shit about the Fricker family problems, and she's not staying if the banks of the Dawson have broken. Once she's retrieved Bruno, she's out of here. Outside in knee-deep water, she heads to the yard where Miss Fricker's gone and tied Bruno a couple of metres away from the goat. She's thrown by how fast the water's risen. SES Jesus had warned her that when it came, it was full on. He had seen it down south when he was living in Lismore. He was a city boy, amazed by how everything could change in less than 5 minutes. It takes Rosie more than one attempt to undo the goat, and the moment he's free, he nicks off. Rosie wades over to where Bruno is barking. The water suddenly hurls her forward, slamming her into the fence, winding her. It's only Bruno's whine that has her struggling to her feet to clutch the post and edge towards him, the splinters digging deep into her palm until she feels the wet fur of his coat against her arm. She's frightened to untie him, for fear of him being swept away, but can't bear the idea of keeping him tethered in case he goes under and drowns in front of her. Because if he does, Rosie knows she'll let go. Fears she's been wanting to let go for so long now. Studying the floor around her, she takes a chance, carefully unties Bruno and wraps the leash around her wrist, but goes under twice and feels herself being swept away, It's only the hill's hoist that she latches herself onto to stop them. She's colder than she's ever been in her life, but she doesn't move because the water has a rage beyond anything she's seen, and it wants to snatch them both, wants to fling them against a tree trunk or the side of the house. There's a vengeance to its force, and she can't fight it because she's bone-tired, wants to close her eyes, except Bruno is growling beside her and she knows they have to find their way back up those steps. But as cold and frightened as she is, Rosie feels safe staying put, because in the backyard of the house in Dalhousie Street, her best memories were of the hill's hoist, of her mother singing Rosie songs in dialect. Rosie knew them all, and she sings them quietly in Bruno's ear until it's her mother's voice she can hear, clearer than she has for years. She doesn't know how long they stay, doesn't know how she finds the strength to let go again, but somehow they make it inside. The entire downstairs is flooded, and for an awful moment she thinks Joy Fricker has been swept away, until she sees the old woman sitting waist-deep in water on the stairs, her teeth chattering. "Upstairs," Rosie manages to say. Miss Fricker shakes her head and Rosie figures that she's tried to get up those stairs and failed. For once, she feels sorry for her. There's a vulnerability that Rosie hasn't seen before, even after the hip replacement, when she couldn't wipe her bum without help. "We can't stay down here, Joy. Let's go." Rosie's no bigger than Miss Fricker, and she buckles under her weight as she helps her step by step, Bruno at their heels shoving them forward. She's worried that she'll snap Miss Fricker's arm, but better a broken arm than being found face down in rancid water. In a musty-smelling room that Joy Fricker hasn't used since her operation, Rosie removes the old woman's wet clothing and dresses her. In her own room, she strips off and finds a pair of shorts and a t-shirt, anything that won't drag her down if she ends up back in the water. The deluge becomes a phantom in her head, and she imagines it creeping its way up, engulfing them, so she drags a chair onto the landing and keeps watch at the top of the stairs. Has no idea what she'll do if the water slinks towards them, but needs to know what she's up against. Later, in the dark, she feels a shudder of the house, picks up the torch and goes to the window, trying to get a glimpse of whatever's coming downstream to hammer them. "My father built this house for me." Rosie jumps at the sound of her voice, shines a light towards Miss Fricker, who's standing at her bedroom door. "It's got good foundations." Rosie helps the old woman back into bed and then curls up in the tacky velvet armchair close by. On the wall, the Sacred Heart of Mary clock taunts her, moving at the excruciating speed that punishes those who are praying for time to pass. "If my father knew what his grandsons were trying to do, it would have broken his heart," Miss Fricker says. For her, there still seems to be a greater malevolence than a flood. Despite the darkness, Rosie can feel the old woman's bitter scrutiny. "You look the type to break your father's heart." "Yeah, but he broke mine first." A voice wakes them. Bruno is barking at the bedroom door and Rosie untangles herself from the chair, blinded by daylight that snuck up on her while she wasn't looking. She wipes saliva from her mouth and heads to the landing. "Looters," Miss Fricker whispers from her bed, because everyone is the enemy in her eyes. Rosie puts a finger to her lips and creeps down a step for a look. SES Jesus is standing thigh-deep in water, wearing only his budgie smugglers, an orange SES jacket. Not quite an apparition, but Rosie feels a hysterical laugh bubble up inside her at the sight of him. "Told you to get to higher ground," he says. "Have you got a boat?" He shakes his head. "The CFA have lent us their truck. Outboard motors are too dangerous. Who knows what's under this water?" Rosie helps Miss Fricker out of bed and can feel the old woman trembling. On the mantelpiece she sees a Mary MacKillop brooch and pins it onto Miss Fricker's dress before walking her to the door. The old woman refuses to take another step at the sight of him coming up the stairs. "Now they're hiring perverts," she mutters. "You're going to have to put your arms around my neck," Jim tells Miss Fricker. "And I'm going to have one arm around your back and the other under your knees." And there's something about the way skinny SES Jesus hitches Miss Fricker up in his arms and wades through the deluge that makes Rosie think that she'd follow him anywhere. It's the town butcher who drives the CFA truck through the flood water. He loses control of the wheel more than once, yelling, "Christ!" at the top of his lungs. Rosie feels the perspiration running down her brow, undoes her seatbelt, readying herself for the inevitable. They'll go under for sure, trapped in a tomb of water. As if sensing her fear, Jim turns in the front seat, catches her eye. "Almost there, mate." They pass the cenotaph, and Rosie sees shops half submerged, garbage bins bobbing in filthy brown water, and an elderly couple sitting on the roof of their car being towed by a ute. The butcher, Mick, she thinks, swears at a couple of kids watching it all, sitting on the awning above the fish and chip shop, laughing their heads off, oblivious to the fear. And it's only SES Jesus's calm instructions to Mick, suggesting another route down less dangerous roads, that bring Rosie any comfort. The evacuation centre is in the cottage owned by the Country Women's Association, perched high on a hill. Standing at the entrance, Rosie sees a familiar face, one she's locked horns with before. A couple of weeks back, she had to pick up medication for Miss Fricker at the hospital pharmacy and was put through the 3rd degree by this woman, a local midwife who had come in to deliver a baby. This morning, she looks at Rosie with just as much hostility. "No dogs allowed, love," she says. Rosie can't believe what she's hearing. "I'm not leaving him outside." "I'll take him someplace safe," Jim says. But Rosie's shaking her head. "I'll keep him in the corner and he won't move." The midwife holds up a finger of warning at Rosie. "No dogs allowed," she repeats before leading Miss Fricker away. Rosie feels tears threatening, but she refuses to cry in front of Jim for a second time. The butcher's honking the horn and Jim holds out a hand to her. She lets him take the leash and he walks away. Inside the cottage, there are 3 large living spaces, all packed with people, most sleeping on solid-looking mattresses. Rosie notices a couple of the older evacuees are lying on comfy armchairs. She checks on Miss Fricker before searching out a midwife who she finds in the CWA kitchen boiling water on a portable stove. "We need one of those armchairs," Rosie says. "Be patient," the other woman says without looking up. "Everyone's gone through a lot, okay? You're not the only one." "Miss Fricker's had a hip replacement," Rosie insists. "She needs to be comfortable." "Sorry, love. None left for the time being." "Don't fucking sorry love me again," Rosie says. The midwife looks up. Rosie flinches because the woman reminds her too much of her mum. They would have been the same age, both with long black wavy hair and fierce dark eyes, except the midwife's an islander and the owner of the mothership of dirty looks. "You need to change your attitude." "I'll change it when you get Miss Fricker onto something comfortable." Soon after, 2 teenagers carry an armchair to where Miss Fricker is sitting on a fold-up seat beside Maeve from the news agency, who hasn't stopped speaking since they arrived. Rosie's heard Miss Fricker say, "Shut up, Maeve," more than once. "Auntie Min says it's from the office, so you better take care of it," the older of the boys says. Later, Rosie finds Min, the midwife, watching them from the door, regrets not looking away before she's beckoned over by an aggressive hand. "What?" Rosie says. Another scathing look. "Don't you what me, you little bitch. Come and help me with morning tea." Handing out the tea and biscuits means that people want to talk. Most are worried about their homes, their pets, their photos, their insurance documents. Maeve is in tears. "Everything in the shop's gone," she tells Rosie. "Everything. What if they won't cover me?" Rosie's grateful that she has nothing to lose. "It could be worse, Maeve," a woman with a couple of kids hanging off her says from across the room. One of her girls has been crying for their dog all morning because they had to leave him behind. Later that day, it does get worse. SES Kev and a couple of young guys come in, looking gutted. After that, it's like the power companies come in and turned off everyone's voices, because down by one of the properties backing onto the river, a baby's been swept from his father's arms, and out by the old mill road, 2 people are missing. Their car went over the embankment. Min hands Rosie a folder. tells her to tick off the names from the electoral roll. They need to start working out where everyone is. Most have gone to family and friends on higher ground. Some stayed in their homes and have ended up here. Rosie can't help thinking that she's not on the town electoral roll. If she'd got swept away from the Hills Hoist yesterday, she wouldn't have even been considered missing. Jim comes looking for her later, and they just stand around for a while until he says, "You want to go somewhere?" And in his room upstairs at the pub, her legs are wrapped around his hips, and there isn't really that much time for pleasantries or catch-up. But she doesn't care, for most of it. She's in her world and he's in his, and it's fast, and she likes the fact that she doesn't have to pretend with this guy. Later, she asks where he's from. "Sydney. You?" She can't believe it. "Same." No more questions, she tells herself, but can't resist. "Where?" "Grew up in Waterloo, but mainly hang out in the inner west when I'm home. Close to you?" Closer than she'd care to admit. She doesn't answer. Rosie doesn't want to think of the Dalhousie street and who lives there now. "What are the chances?" he says. "You and me from the same place." Rosie's dad believed in chances and fate. He believed in signs. Rosie doesn't believe in anything hopeful. "What's your story?" he asks. She shrugs. No story, because exchanging misery isn't her style. And at the moment, even her misery can't top a baby being swept away. They talk about Bruno. "He's out on a property off the highway," Jim tells her. "You know, near the goods train track. The family's looking after a few other animals. I don't think he likes goats." He glances at her. "History of goat trouble in his past?" She laughs for the second time in days. It's under a dirty hungover sky that the rest of the world arrives a couple of days later. The insurance companies are there first, pitching their tents on the property beside the CWA, along with the Red Cross, RACQ, recovery hubs and state police. The Premier visits because she's been up north and the roads there are open. The CWA and St Vinny's people are sorting through the donations that have arrived from the surrounding towns, and Min is in charge of feeding whoever turns up. Rosie gets delegated to chopping onions for the sausage sizzle. It all seems productive and warm-hearted, but beneath the surface it's anything but. Some have it in for the cops and the mayor because the evacuation plans came too late. Others complain they were stranded for more than 2 days without food drops and blame the SES. One woman comes up and gets in Min's face. "Your husband's useless." "You were told to evacuate," Min says calmly. "And you were told to have a flood plan." Rosie's discovered that Min's husband is a pot-bellied chief of the SES, so Min's pretty particular about how much criticism he gets. Rosie keeps to herself. She doesn't belong to these people, so the anger and grief isn't hers to own. It stops people talking to her, confiding, crying. She sees Jim once that day, maybe because it's hard to avoid someone you're looking for. He knows how to charm the old CWA women. One hands him a plate of food that he wolfs down, and then he's gone again. The Red Cross start working out temporary accommodation, and Rosie has to tell Miss Fricker that she'll be staying at the nursing home wing of the hospital from tomorrow onwards. "That's what you think," Miss Fricker mutters. "Well, you can't stay here, and you can't go back to your place until the clean-up's over." "My nephews are behind this, aren't they? Them and those wives of theirs." "They have nothing to do with this, Joy." Miss Fricker mutters something under her breath. "Do you want me to set your hair?" Rosie asks. They've switched the water back on. "What would you know about setting hair?" "I'm only offering once, so it's a yes or a no." Rosie had spied a set of curlers and styling stuff in the St Vinny's donations and ends up setting the hair of at least half a dozen pensioners in the CWA laundry. Even Min wants a wash and blow dry. Rosie combs the woman's hair over and over again, because it's what she used to do for her mum before the chemo got to it. "Are you staying?" Min asks, eyeing her through the mirror. "No." "So if you know anyone heading south..." "Have you got family down there?" "I've got a house," Rosie says briskly. Min is still studying her. "What are you going to do with your life, Rosie?" Start thinking of that now or you waste good opportunities. Do you like your job? Rosie asks. Min nods. It means I know every baby and kid in this town. Rosie's eyes meet hers in the mirror, thinks of that lost baby. Did you deliver? Yes, I did. Rosie sees a glimpse of tears, but before she can say anything else, Min stands up, already composed. There's something about getting your hair done that makes you feel half decent, doll. She's lying on top of Jim, and he pushes her hair off her face. They're all sweaty, skin on skin. She can feel the trickle of sweat between her breasts, feels his tongue there. She sits up, straddling him, studying his strange face. Not good looking, but behind the beard there's a kind face. Sad, crazy eyes. Where are you off to next? He asks. She shrugs. Hopes he won't ask to tag along, because right now she'd say yes, and there's something about this guy that would break her if he ends up being a disappointment. You? He shrugs. Can't go home yet. Why? I'm on a good behaviour bond, so I can't leave the state for another 18 months. What did you do? Drugs. Dealing? He shakes his head. Possession. She feels his stare. Min says you keep to yourself. Rosie lies back down beside him, unimpressed. I don't like people and I don't appreciate being spoken about. His tongue is at work again. Apart from his annoying habit of talking while she's having an orgasm, he's pretty generous in the sex department. Makes it last, unlike Roger next door. What's your favourite thing to do, Rosie? He asks when they're still awake in the early hours of the morning watching the shadows playing on the wall. Going on road trips? With the right person, that is. Can't stand getting stuck with someone who talks about nothing, or who doesn't talk at all. The best is when you're with someone who's comfortable with silence, but doesn't make you feel lonely. You feel lonely sometimes? Always, she wants to say. Worse is when she feels lonely in the company of others. The ache of it makes her feel weary, like she isn't 19, more like 100. SES Jesus must see something in her eyes, because he leans over her, a hand on her cheek. The trick is don't give in to it, mate. It's a trick, is it? She asks. There's nothing held back about him, no cruel games. The yearning in his eyes makes her want to look away, but regardless of the fact that he never shuts up, she feels less alone when she hears his voice. So she asks him more. My mum, she was always a bit crazy, he says. The type to turn up to my primary school off her nut, you know? I was a bit like that. The riddling kid. And then one day when I'm 10, she goes to Woolies to buy bread and milk and doesn't come back. Ever? He shakes his head. It got to me a couple of years ago when my grandpop died and I had to get out of our flat because it was a housing commission and someone else was waiting in line for it. And I realised I didn't have a home, so I disappeared for about a year. My friends aren't the type to let go, which is a good thing. So I ended up back in Sydney, couch surfing. A couple of months ago, I'm living with my best mate's family and she convinces me to track down my mum. Your best mate's a girl? Italian, like you. Rosie feels herself bristling. Did you pick me up because you got a thing for your best friend? No, I picked you up because you were the hottest girl in the pub and I wanted to have sex with you. Using a very unoriginal line. Can I get back to my story? He says. Go on. Anyway, her boyfriend and I are looking online for a car and we come across some guy who's fixed up a Monaro. You know what a Monaro is? Of course I do. Of course you do. So where's your Monaro? Mate, let me finish the story. We get to this guy's garage and he takes one look at me and that's it. He has a feeling in his bones. I was meant to own this car. And the more he says it, the more I believe it because he doesn't seem like a fake. But my mate, Will, is cautious. Needs to check it out. Rings his brothers who are car experts, that sort of thing. All while this guy is staring at me. Why do you want this car? he asks, which I thought was a strange question, but I tell him the truth because I'm looking for family and he just smiles at me. Buy the car and you'll find your family. That's pretty freaky. He had an accent, even freakier. Did you find your mum? He nods. In Lismore. His voice softens. Rosie likes a guy whose voice softens at the mention of his mother. You know how they say people can't turn their lives around? Well, my mother did. Hasn't touched drugs or alcohol in 11 years. Married a born-again Christian. Bawled her eyes out when she saw me. Said she loved me, but made me promise to stay away. She's got a 10-year-old boy and 8-year-old twin girls and she hadn't told him about me. He turns to her, a flash of vulnerability in his eyes. But she did give me the name of my father. Thinks he lives in Bundaberg. So I took off and ended up in this vicinity. Problem is that last week my car got stolen just outside town at a servo while I was in the dunny. You lost a Monaro? No, it was stolen, he laughed. It's how I met Kev. He was filling up his tank and I hitched a ride into town with him. By that stage, it was raining hard up north and I knew I was stuck here for a while, and that's how I ended up volunteering for emergency services. When are you leaving? She asks. When I get myself a cheap car. Rosie is worried for him. Doesn't know him from a bar of soap, but knows this guy's heading for disappointment. Just say your father doesn't want to be found, she asks. Jim thinks about it for a moment. The man's got a right to know his son. Anyway, I'm one of those crossing that bridge when I come to it people. He leans on his elbow, looking down at her, a ghost of a smile on his face. You listen too much for someone who doesn't like people. You talk too much for someone who's just interested in sex. By the end of the week, the old Simpson Road is reopened. Rosie takes Bruno back to Miss Fricker's place by the gully to check out the damage. The chooks and ducks and a couple of kittens that had taken refuge in the shed are all dead, and Rosie finds herself gagging. But the goat comes back, peeks its head through the door to irritate Bruno. The back-breaking part of the clean-up is the downstairs area of the house, covered in silt. She works the next couple of days hosing down and scrubbing every wall. The mud has crept into every crevice, but she keeps at it. She knows a drill because she's heard it over and over again this week. Anything made of plastic or wood gets chucked. Disinfect everything. Watch out for snakes. In the kitchen and dining room, she pulls up the lino and carpet and drags it out back where the roses are gone and the spotted gum tree has cracked in two and smashed the fence and the hen house. Working this hard reminds Rosie of being with her parents when she was a kid, of stripping paint and trawling junkyards with her dad for anything of worth. She remembers the derelict building on Lilyfield Road where they found the old floorboards that ended up on the lounge room floor of the place on Dalhousie Street. Suddenly she's crying. Even after 5 years without her mother and a year without her dad, the thought of never seeing them again robs her of breath. She's relieved to be on her own because here she can scream with rage, with grief, until her throat feels shredded. And the only thing that gets her through the depression of her days is the thought of lying next to SES Jesus, listening to the rumble of his voice as she tries to sleep. One night he cries, and she doesn't know whether it's because of the bodies they found in the paddock 2 k's out of town, or because his car got him as far as a town that's soaked with despair. She holds him in her arms and feels the shudders. Shh, it's okay. It's okay. He clings to her, and being this needed feels better than sex. It's when Rosie knows she has to leave this place, because she could easily love this guy. It's what Rosie does best. She loves broken people who damage her in return. I just want to warn you that I'm leaving any day now. Min's helping me find someone who's heading south. It's the right thing to say to someone whose mum went to Woolies and didn't come back. It's only a couple of days later when Min lets Rosie know about one of the SES volunteers from Newcastle who's heading home, 2 hours from Sydney. "Come by the CWA and I'll pack you a lunch doll," Min says. Rosie and Bruno track Jim down to the property he's been helping out on by the creek. A couple of the younger kids have taken it upon themselves to look after the domestic animals that haven't been claimed. Jim's helping them with an inventory, labelling cages and jotting things down. He lets a galah nip at his finger, right opposite a Persian cat that eyes the bird with disdain and a promise of violence. "What are you writing?" she asks. "Just where we found them and if they have a name on a collar. I'll put the details up on the notice board in the pub." He catches her eye. "You're leaving?" Not a question. She nods. "Can you make sure Miss Fricker gets home sooner rather than later?" "Am I breaking her out of the nursing home?" he asks, mischief in his eyes. "She'd like that." He takes her hand, linking it with his. "I'll give you my number," he says. She shrugs. "I don't have a mobile." "Take it anyway." He writes on her palm with the marker. She loves the feel of his knuckles against her palm as he writes, like the sinew of his body against her when they have sex. Rosie feels as if every part of her is stamped by this guy's bony strangeness. "First chance you get, copy this down on a piece of paper," he says. She knows there'll never be a reason to ring this number. She's not a, "hello, let's catch up" type of girl. And then his mouth is on hers, and a part of Rosie feels desolate, because maybe deep down she thought SES Jesus was one of her father's signs after all. Except they're both travelling in opposite directions and she can't think of anything powerful enough to place them on the same path. She goes back to the nursing home to tell Miss Fricker she's leaving. Wordlessly takes the old woman to the toilet, cleans her up, helps her back to where she was sulking by the window. When she pins the Mary McKillop brooch on Joy's collar, she feels something press against the palm of her hand. A whole lot of $100 bills rolled up. Rosie tries to return it, but the old woman's hand is a fist. "Take it. You've wiped my ass and bought me beer. You deserve it." Rosie thinks that "You've wiped my ass and bought me beer" would make a great title to a country and western song. "Have you seen the house?" Joy asks. "Been there all week. You'll be ready to go home soon." "How are my roses?" "Dead. Everything outside was wiped out except for the goat." "Is the house still standing? Because that's all that counts." Rosie nods, goes to walk away but stops herself. "My father spent 18 years of his life building a house," she tells Miss Fricker. "He wasn't a builder, just one of those guys who knew what he was doing. Anyone who walked past it would say, 'That's the house Seb Gennaro is building for his family.' But my mum got sick and never got to see it finished, and within a year he remarried, then he died, and now she thinks it's hers, won't move out. The house my dad built for me and my mum." She walks away because oversharing isn't her thing. "Rosie." It's the first time Miss Fricker has ever used her name. Rosie turns back one more time. "Keep away from good-for-nothings. It's what kept me alive all these years." She walks past the cenotaph and up to the main street where everyone's hard at work. Maeve is dumping stuff into a skip bin. Next door, Rockman's is all but ruined. If it's not water, it's mud. But it doesn't stop them working. She envies these people. Some have lost everything, and for the life of her, she can't get that baby being swept away out of her head. Or those who are uninsured because living so close to a river means the insurance companies won't touch them for less than a fortune. They belong to something bigger than Rosie and had for a while, and as depressed as they all seem, the words, "Do you want a cuppa?" seem to change everything for a moment. Rosie hasn't belonged to anything for longer than she can remember. Her fault, their fault, whoever's fault it is, the bleakness consumes her. She hears a deluge spoken about over and over, but a deluge can't be that bad. It has substance. Rosie wants deluge. She wants to watch her whole life float down the river so she can do what these people are doing now. Go retrieve it. Put their lives back together again. She sees her ride pull up outside the pub, just as it begins to rain. Opens her hand, studies the name, James Haler. The phone number's already beginning to smudge, like she knew it would. She puts her hands into her pockets, gets into the truck. "What about this rain?" A nasal ZZ Top type from Newcastle says, as if he's the first to notice the weather in weeks. Rosie knows she's going to be a passenger to someone who doesn't know when to keep his mouth shut. "You got everything?" he asks. She thinks for a moment and asks for a pen and paper. Part 2. The House That Seb Built. Chapter 2. To justmartha@me.com. From sophiekolitos@gmail.com. Date 1st March 2011. Subject: Sister Mo is dead. Dear Martha, where have you been and why aren't you answering my phone calls? I told George this is the longest you and I haven't spoken since that time in Year 12 when you misunderstood Elizabeth King's words and imagined that everyone was blaming you after we lost the netball grand finals. Anyway, Sister Mo died on Saturday. I know you've spent the past 30 years avoiding any school reunion, but apparently Alana Chairbull went to see her at the nursing home and Mo spoke about you. So I think she'd want you to be at her funeral on Thursday. Martha, please respond. Elizabeth King is after everyone's emails. Love, Sophie. P.S. Although you would have received the invitation to Scarlett's birthday party, I've attached a photo from the day. You can see how upset she looks because her godmother chose not to turn up. To sophiekolitos@gmail.com. From justmartha@me.com. Date 1st March 2011. Sophie, you better not have given anyone my email address after I've spent 3 decades making sure they can't contact me. Just what I need. Another shitload of vacuous emails sent by people who have nothing better to do with their lives. And for the record, what part of "you lost us the grand finals" spoken by Elizabeth King would I have misunderstood in Year 12? Martha. P.S. We haven't seen each other for 2 weeks, Sophie. Don't be so dramatic. To justmartha@me.com. From sophiekolitos@gmail.com. Date 1st March 2011. Subject: the class of 80. Dear Martha, I had no choice giving Elizabeth your email. She probably won't contact you anyway. I'm sure she got the hint years ago that you don't want to be part of a reunion. Love, Sophie. To hairball@nsw.edu.au. justmartha@me.com. sophiekolitos@gmail.com. juleshealy@yahoo.com. From Queen Elizabeth III@gmail.com. Date 1st March 2011. Subject: Sister Maureen Louise Cassidy's funeral. Hi girls. Now that I've got all your contact details, let's get down to business. Sister Mo would have loved nothing better than her Golden Girls doing the offertory procession on Thursday. I'm not ruling out the liturgical dance just yet. You know how Mo felt about those she choreographed. Any preferences on what you want to carry in the procession? Bread? Wine? The napkin? Regards, Elizabeth King. To sophiekolitos@gmail.com. From justmartha@me.com. Date 1st March 2011. Obviously, she didn't get the hint, Sophie. I'm not spending Thursday dancing up a church aisle, pretending to hold the body and blood of Christ, grieving an evil nun who delegated me to wing defence for 6 years while the rest of you basked in the glory of being centres or shooters. Anyway, I've already reached my funeral quota for the month. Please decline on my behalf, Martha. To justmartha@me.com. From sophiekolitos@gmail.com. Date 1st March 2011. Subject: WMD. Dear Martha, why aren't I surprised that you brought up the netball team? Remember the F Sister Mo gave us for our assignment on the minority groups persecuted through the ages, and you sketched all the victims wearing WD bibs? You know what you should have had on your bib back then? WMD, not WD, because you're a weapon of mass destruction when it comes to bringing up anything related to school. It's made you paranoid, Martha. To sophiekolitos@gmail.com from justmartha@me.com. Date 1st March 2011. I'm not paranoid, Sophie. To justmartha@me.com from sophiekolitos@gmail.com. Date 1st March 2011. At school, you were convinced that Julia Healy's brother only went out with centres and shooters. Move on, for crying out loud. George says you're better than that. Sophie. P.S. Did you hear Ewan Healy got sacked from his NRL coaching position? To sophiekolitos@gmail.com from justmartha@me.com. Date 1st March 2011. I can't believe you discuss me and the netball days with George. Is it dinner time news? Is that why Scarlett looked so depressed in her birthday photo? And here I thought it was because you threw her a fairy party when it's obvious my goddaughter was never meant to be in shul. And no need to bring up Ewan Healy. Thank you. I bumped into him at Charlie P's funeral in the Hunter last week. He didn't even know who I was, so I'm not exactly crying over the fact that he went out with most of you at some time in his life. Martha. To justmartha@me.com from juleshealy@yahoo.com. Date 2nd March 2011. Subject, it's been a long time. Dear Martha, Sophie mentioned you might not be at Mo's funeral on Thursday. Alana and I want to have you over for a catch-up. Best. Julia. P.S. Did you know my brother was divorced? Are you going out with anyone? To sophiekolitos@gmail.com from justmartha@me.com. Date 2nd March 2011. Sophie, did you write to Julia Healy and suggest matching me up with her brother? To justmartha@me.com from sophiekolitos@gmail.com. Date 2nd March 2011. Subject, olive branch. In a brief IM conversation we had today, Julia mentioned that she's extending an olive branch, Martha. Regardless of how toxic your relationship was in high school, it seems as if she's moved on. You should too. Love, Sophie. To sophiekolitos@gmail.com from justmartha@me.com. Date 2nd March 2011. Quit the subject line, Sophie. There's supposed to be a hint of what you're going to say, not a repetition. And you wonder why I don't respond to you sometimes. Subject, mammogram scare. Subject, head lice alert. Subject, I'm the prophet of doom. One day, I want you to send me an email that doesn't spell despair before you even say hello. To justmartha@me.com from sophiekolitos@gmail.com. Date 2nd March 2011. Subject, how can you say that? Martha, how can you say that? I send you the most beautiful emails and your subject line last month was fuck these angels off. To sophiekolitos@gmail.com from justmartha@me.com. Date 2nd March 2011. Because I've told you so many times not to send those chain emails about passing it on to another 20 people so an angel will bless me. I lost my mother and husband within a 4-year period, Sophie. Do you honestly believe I'm on an angel's mailing list? Martha. P.S. Don't you think it's just like Julia to try and match me up with her brother when he no longer resembles JFK Jr.? All of a sudden, I'm good enough for Ewan Healy because he's jobless at 50 and has love handles. To justmartha@me.com from sophiekolitos@gmail.com. Date 2nd March 2011. Subject, how do you even know Ewan Healy has love handles? I thought you didn't talk to him at the funeral. Please explain. To justmartha@me.com, sophiekolitos@gmail.com, juleshealy@yahoo.com, queenelizabeth3@gmail.com, from ahairball@nsw.edu.au. Date 2nd March 2011. Subject, Burwood United. Hear me out, girls, because I think there's a purpose to Sister Mo's death. Last Saturday, Jules and I were up at Sintra Park watching the kids play netball and we saw those Ashbury trolls who demoralised us back in 80. They've reformed a team and they look smug. We have to get the Burwood United team back together. Love, Alana. To ahairball@nsw.edu.au. justmartha@me.com, sophiekolitos@gmail.com, juleshealy@yahoo.com, from queenelizabeth3@gmail.com, date 2nd March 2011, subject re Burwood United. We'll need to find another couple of players to replace Karen and Mary. They've completely let themselves go and have got bucklies of getting into the uniform. Any suggestions? Elizabeth, kiss kiss. P.S. Is it true you're putting Dalhousie Street on the market, Martha? 2. queenelizabeth3@gmail.com, achaebel@nsw.edu.au, sophiekolitos@gmail.com, juleshealy@yahoo.com, from justmartha@me.com. Date 2nd March 2011. I am not rejoining the team. Please take me off this thread. M. To justmartha@me.com, from sophiekolitos@gmail.com. Date 2nd March 2011. Subject: House on the market? Martha, what's going on? You would never put Dalhousie Street on the market unless it was bad news. Don't do anything rash, please. I've put away money for Scarlett's private school fund. Don't tell George that we're going to send her to a private school. If you need money, it's yours. I can't bear the idea of you giving up that house. Love, Sophie. To sophiekolitos@gmail.com, from justmartha@me.com. Date 2nd March 2011. Dear Sophie, I can't talk about this now. Too depressing. But thank you. Love, Martha. P.S. Nothing will convince me to join the Real Housewives of Burwood United. To justmartha@me.com, from achaebel@nsw.edu.au. Date 2nd March 2011. Subject: You can play centre, Martha. Are you in? The house that Seb once started building for his other family is almost complete. What's left for Martha is the backyard and the grouting on the kitchen floor and wall tiles. It's all about deciding the colour of the mortar to complete the ceramics. It's been this way for months now, but she can't find it in her to finish. Each night she stares at the murky space between the cobalt ceramics, frightened of what the finality of it all means, so it stays undone. Upstairs she can hear the baby. It's constant, but she's become accustomed to its cry these past weeks. Sooner or later, she has to venture up those steps, and perhaps she'll do it tonight. But there's still a tire to be contended with, courtesy of some delinquent who's decided to slash hers outside the house. She wants to go out there to change it, but knows Seb's voice will be in her ear, telling her to finish the grouting and to start on the backyard, or go upstairs and ask about the baby. So she calls a cab and heads down to Neald Park, where Sophie and the others said they'd be training, because putting off the inevitable has been Martha's go-to option for some time now. She arrives just as the streetlights flicker on around the park. Can see Julia Healy running a lap with the same intensity she had in their school days. Close by, Alana Chaebel and Elizabeth King are warming up. Martha hasn't seen them in years, but here she is in their company again. First Sister Mo's funeral, now training. We thought you'd pike, Alana says, giving her a quick hug. I'm never one to pike. Elizabeth King gives Martha a quick appraisal. No love lost between them. They had cohabited the same social group all those years ago because Sophie was the common denominator. You look good as a brunette, Martha. Martha likes a compliment. It's what she misses about her work environment. A lack of discussion about the important things in life, such as semi-permanence and shellac. Julia Healy jogs past and the others join her. Alana and I made a bet you'd pike, she calls out. Martha catches up with them, already cramping at the 20-metre mark. What's with the taxi? Julia asks. Some dickhead at work put a Cops a Top sticker on my back window, which inspired another dickhead to slash my tyres. I heard you were working for the police. The minister, Martha corrects. Sophie arrives, late as usual, chewing gum as delicately as she can and rubbing her hands with lavender oil because she's been smoking. She jogs across the oval and falls in next to Martha. Shoulder bumps her. I told them you'd come. It's a reason why Martha has never let go of Sophie. Unconditional love since they were 12 years old. even back at school when the others had become a troika. "What's your brother doing here, Jules?" Sophie asks. Martha falters for the slightest of moments, hopes none of the others have noticed. "He's training us," Julia says. Ewan Healy is heading towards them, a large sports duffel bag slung over his shoulder. "I've just realised that I've never seen him in anything but shorts and joggers," Sophie says. "Martha has," Julia says. Martha ignores the scrutiny. "In his suit at Charlie P's funeral," Julia says. She's jogging beside Martha now and watching her closely. "My brother said your speech made grown men cry." "I make grown men cry every day. It's too easy." When they reach Ewan, he doesn't do eye contact, but he's contemplative, as if he can't find the words to describe what he's just seen. Twice divorced and sacked from a lucrative coaching job, he has truly hit rock bottom training his sister's netball team. "Too much talking out there, girls." "Fuck off, Ewan," Elizabeth says. He dumped her on the night of their school formal, and Elizabeth clearly hasn't forgiven him after all these years. As a punishment, he has them doing wind sprints, followed by a circuit of torture. Martha's relieved when her phone rings. "Don't answer that, please," he politely requests, making eye contact this time. "Finally, Healy." "Let me tell the Minister for Police that I'm doing squats and can't talk," she says. When it's over, he goes out to collect the equipment and takes a phone call. "What a cranky bastard he's turned out to be, Julia," Sophie says. A lot on his plate, Julia is focused on her brother while fishing in her bag for keys. "We'll drop you off, Martha." Not quite an offer, more like an order. It's one of the reasons Martha and Julia clashed so much in high school. Both refused to be a subordinate of the other. Ewan returns and he doesn't look happy. "We're taking Martha home," Julia tells him. A look passes between the Healys. "We've got to get Dad," he says. "Maybe someone else can take Martha home." "I already offered," Julia says. As they walk to the car, there's an uncomfortable silence. Martha doesn't do uncomfortable, or inadequate, or not good enough. "I'll take a cab." "Don't take a cab," Ewan says, and she can hear weariness in his voice. They reach Julia's Jeep, and the others insist that Martha sits in the front. Without asking for instruction, Julia drives around the Bay Run on Henley Marine Drive, where Martha can see a few time-starved joggers hitting the track in the dark. In the back seat, Ewan and Alana sit in silence. Martha doesn't know what it all means. The Healys and Chairballs have lived next door to each other all their lives. Julia and Alana have been partners for half that time. It's not exactly strained, but Martha can sense that things aren't right. "How are the kids?" she asks. Sophie has persisted in keeping Martha up to date on all of their lives, whether Martha wanted the information or not. Julia and Alana's kids have lived with them for 4 years now. Like most people caught up in the foster care system, the adoption is taking forever. "Marley's full of attitude and Samuel's a sensitive one," Alana says. "But he's tough, and she's a softie," Julia says. She slows down to an almost stop as they're about to pass the rowing shed, and Martha can see the orange glow of the streetlights illuminating a lone walker. After a moment, Julia picks up a little speed again. "How old are they now?" Martha asks. 8 and 6. "Jules," Ewan says. Martha hears a seatbelt come off in the back seat and feels him brush up against her as he leans in between her and Julia, pointing to a hunched figure walking under the Iron Cove Bridge. "Is that your father?" Martha asks. "He's keen." Julia stops the car and Ewan gets out, crossing the road, jogging towards him. After a moment, Julia follows. Because of her work, Martha spends too much time reading crime reports and can't help being the alarmist. It's dangerous walking out on his own at this time of night. Alana doesn't speak for a moment. "They're both finding it tough," she finally says. Before Martha can ask what she means, Ewan and Julia are heading back towards the car with their father. The stench of urine is overwhelming. It reminds Martha of the old guys who live out on the streets close to the police headquarters in Surrey Hills. She turns in her seat to say hello, surprised by the emotion that comes over her. She hasn't seen Julia's father in more than 30 years, but it feels like yesterday. "Do you remember me, Mr. Healy?" "Martha Newman." "You and Mr. Chairbull used to do the St. Vinny's run with my father." He smiles at her, but doesn't respond. "Martha went to school with Julia, Dad," Ewan tells his father. "Who's Julia?" There's silence, and Martha suddenly gets it. Feels for them all. The only relief that came from the death of her mother and father was that they still knew who she was until the very end. There's a tap on her shoulder, and she turns back to John Healy. "I'm off to see my son play footy down at Leichhardt Oval," he tells Martha. "Do you know he was chosen for the Balmain Juniors?" And because the mood in the car is heavy with sadness and she doesn't know what else to say, Martha takes his hand and squeezes it. "Well, let's hope it doesn't go to his head," she says. After a moment, she hears a laugh from the back seat. They pull up in front of her house a little while later. "A neighbour of ours used to deliver mail here on this street," Alana says, "and he'd go on about how the man who bought the hoarder's place on Dalhousie Street wasted his money." Martha had heard it all before. Most people would say that after 18 years, Seb would never finish it. He used to be a joke, until he was a tragedy. But he didn't care what people thought. Anyone who sees the house now understands why. "No such thing as wasting money on a house in this area," Julia says. Martha's phone rings. "Thanks for the lift," she says, getting out and answering it. After 30 minutes of trying to avoid a media shitstorm concerning the part-time hours of a local police station, Martha stays outside in the dark, changing the tyre. Teresa from next door comes out and offers her husband's help, but Martha waves it off. Teresa leaves the light on, and it's not until Martha's inside that it's turned off. She doesn't want to contemplate moving away from their kindness, their inclusion. The quick nighttime visits, offering a leg of lamb they had just won up at the club, or a couple of tomatoes from their garden. Teresa and Marco have been Haberfield people all their lives, their families living within backyard shouting distance, their 3 children brought up between at least 4 households in as many streets surrounding them. Once inside, she heads to the kitchen, because that's always her first port of call when she gets home. It's where she places her keys, hangs up her bag, and sits down at the breakfast nook for a cup of tea. Seb was adamant that the stairs leading to the attic would originate from here because the kitchen is the most communal place in any home. He wasn't as interested in the front room, which accommodated a 3-seater sofa and a TV. He thought that people were more comfortable around a kitchen table. It was a place to be together, to break bread. And in Seb's heart, he always believed Rosie would return to live with them. After a trip out to Camden to tow a client's car, he returned with a second-hand timber butcher's trolley that served as a main table and a sideboard made of a recycled barn door that accommodated her mother's Hummel porcelain figurines and wireless. This place is the greatest reminder Martha has of Lottie, and especially of Seb, of how, back then, the house smelt of coffee beans and what she called peasant food, soaked breadcrumbs, sardines, anchovies, fennel. Despite Seb refusing to romanticise the Sicily he left behind in the late 80s, he couldn't let go of it either. From above, she hears a screaming baby again. If the truth were told, Martha's worried. The cry has been a constant since it arrived, and she doesn't think that's normal. Sooner or later, she has to climb those stairs. But when she fails again, she takes a shower and watches TV because, to avoid the grouting and the backyard and climbing up those stairs, Martha's just got cable. She's catching up on every movie she's missed since marrying Seb and losing him. That covers 6 years and anything made since 2005. Last week, she was engrossed in the Sex and the City movie, which did inspire her to go from blonde to brunette, because the change of hair colour seemed to work a treat in the film, and she found herself watching it over and over again, just to get to the part where Carrie Bradshaw compares the loss of the unreliable Big, who stands her up at the altar, with the death of a loved one. Not even close, Carrie. Because men who stand you up at the altar still get to walk back into your life a year later holding a pair of Manolo Blahnik shoes. Dead ones stay dead. This week, she's moved on to the foreign films. She's given up on the French masterpiece Hidden, because the meaning of it was too hidden, so now she's gone onto a Romanian one. When the doorbell rings, she's hesitant at first. Perhaps her tyre slasher is getting bolder. But she can see the shadow behind the glass and knows who it is. And all Martha wants to do is go back to that day a month ago, because it changed everything she had started to work out about going forward. Hadn't she finished with a certain part of her life? Men? Sex? The bullshit that comes with it? But Charlie P's funeral changed everything for more reasons than one. He hadn't just been a work colleague. They'd been friends forever. Over the years, Martha had lost a lot of male friends to their relationships. Catching up one-on-one had either stopped or changed to group drinks. But Charlie's wife Astrid had never felt threatened, had never felt the need to crush their friendship or even to be part of it. Martha and Charlie had the same taste in music, so she was his gig date. At his wake, Astrid had asked her to speak because the family didn't want it all to be cop talk. Martha hadn't been able to speak at either of her parents' funerals, or Seb's. At her mother Lottie's funeral, she couldn't even open her mouth to mutter thanks to anyone. Sophie had taken care of that, had organised the eulogies, made sure they played Befiel de Dana Wiege for the procession, had enlisted the Kolotos tribe to prepare the food for the wake, and had written the thank you cards. Seb's funeral was even more of a blur. But Martha had to be present for Charlie's funeral. So at the wake, she told a story of being at the David Gray concert with him and how they spoke about what they wanted sung at their funerals, and his choice was Babylon. Later, Ewan Healy approached. Martha had seen him once or twice on sports segments in the news, mumbling in that testy tone most football coaches seem to have post-game. "Nice," was all he said to her. A simple word, but loaded. In the past couple of years, Martha had slipped into that invisibility that belonged to a woman of a certain age. She hadn't let herself go, but it was as if the world had let go of her. It wasn't just men. In pubs and bars and the non-virtual world of socialising, a reminder from the age police that strappy shoes belong to the younger generation. Skinny jeans did too. The words age-appropriate were reintroduced into her life. It was different with her work team because Martha had been there long enough to count. But outside her job and home, she couldn't quite grasp what her place was. Ewan Healy's nice changed that. In high school, he was crush material for the simple fact that he was someone's older brother and that he was male, which meant everything to the daughter of strict German migrants who had never been allowed out. "Do you remember me?" she had asked. "Martha Newman." A blank look. "Julia's friend from school." Martha grabbed another glass of wine off a tray that was doing the rounds. "You asked me to dance at the Year 10 St. Pat's school dance." "Yeah, of course," he said. But she could tell he was lying. Not that she was heartbroken, but there was no harm in letting him suffer slightly. "What was the song?" she asked. "What song?" "The one you asked me to dance to." "You've got to be joking." And she saw a hint of a grin. "Am I supposed to remember that?" She shrugged. "I remember." "Are you going to hold that against me?" He had eyes that were kind and a smile that still had clout, and after all these years, she realised that it hid shyness. That's what his good looks and sporting ability had done back then when they were teenagers. What his post-game mumbling meant. It hid a sort of awkwardness with the world. And in the corner of that function room, beside the floral wreaths and amongst drunken cops, they covered everything. Grief, humiliation, family. She even found herself telling him about the step-demon who was 21 and had gone AWOL. And then they ended up on the balcony. She was drunk. He wasn't. But he let her talk, because that's what Martha was good at, talking, about singing Babylon with Charlie P at the top of their voices at a David Gray concert in 2009. Ewan had known Charlie since his days in the juniors. When he got sacked from his club, Charlie was the first to reach out to him. Martha could see Ewan's eyes water as he told the story. And that happened more than once. She liked that about him. She liked his mannerisms. The scratching of his bottom lip with his thumb when he was about to laugh. The habit of touching her hand as they spoke. It was intimate, not accidental. It's how they had first kissed that night, talking and hand-lingering. And then they were in his car making out like bloody stupid kids. Martha couldn't compare it to what she had felt with Seb, because that relationship was about grief and companionship before it was romantic. Working on the house had brought them solace. But with Ewan Healy, it was about the giddy buzz of attraction, and suddenly, in that car she felt inhibited. "I wasn't prepared for this," she had said after they came up for air. "I've got a Bavarian forest down there and I don't want to be doing a Brazilian or whatever's needed to keep a man interested." Too much information, Martha. And here he is, weeks later, on her doorstep. "I thought I'd look at your car," he says. "Jules said you had a flat tire." "I was married to a mechanic for 3 years," she says. "First thing he taught me was how to change a tire." He goes to speak, but she stops him. "The whole sleeping with a guy and waiting for him to call got old when I was in my 30s, so I'm going to say no thanks to you coming inside and see you next week at training." But then her traitorous dog comes outside, acting as if she's never received affection from her owner. Suki ignores Martha and cries, pressing against Ewan's leg. He crouches for a play before looking up, a sad smile on his face. "Lost mine last year," he says. She nods, knows the old girl is ready to die, but Martha's not ready to let go. "You didn't tell me your dad was that far gone," she says, because maybe she doesn't want him to leave just yet. He nods, doesn't speak. There's a cry from upstairs, then another round of barking. Ewan looks up at the window, surprised before sending her a questioning look. "The step demon is back," she says, "with child and dog." "I thought you said she was a kid." "She's 21. How old's the baby?" "Who knows? We don't engage in conversation. All I know is that she disappeared 2 years ago with Seb's dog and a dropkick and came back last month with a baby and the dog." Martha knows a baby is about to walk because her stunning banister has been fitted with an unstunning child gate. When there seems nothing left to say, Ewan turns to walk away, but stops. "Actually, I lied," he says. "I didn't come about the tire. I just wanted to say something and you've got to let me say it." Martha stays silent. So does he. She points to her watch. "I've got a Romanian film about genocide I'm dying to get back to." Still more silence. He's a pause man. Martha isn't. "I'm having a bit of a fucked year," he finally says. "And to top it off, I'm contemplating putting my father into a nursing home, and that makes me feel like a prick because John Healy's been a hero all my life. And the last thing he remembers about the son he gave everything to is that I'm a failure who got sacked from a dream job because I wasn't good enough." Martha gets a sense that it's the most he's said in a lifetime. "But last month, I went to an old mate's funeral and that day was something better than it should have been because of you and that speech and the fact that you didn't stop talking after I spent years with 2 different women who had nothing to say. I know I'm wanting this at a time that I don't have much to give in return, Martha, but if you're interested, I'd really like us to go out sometime and who knows, I might get to see Bavaria again." "Let's lay that analogy to rest." "Agreed." Martha nudges Suki towards the door, but this time she stops. "The way I see it, the last thing John Healy remembers is that his son was good enough to get chosen for the Balmain Juniors," she says. And his smile has more than just clout, so she nudges the dog inside before they both invite him in. I'm going to remember that song, he says. The one I asked you to dance to. I've been going through all my LPs, so I've narrowed it down to something from Elvis Costello or The Cure. Dream on that you were that cool back then, she says, shutting the door. But she can't help smiling herself.
This is the end of CD 1. The book continues on CD 2. CD 2.
Chapter 3. He's home, and he knows he's home because they're here, and that's the way it is. Just the certainty that one of them will always be around, and it feels like everything's going to be okay, in a way that it hasn't since that phone call. And he's hugging the three of them because he's become the sort of person who goes straight for the clinch. Because once that hug came from Frankie Spinelli years ago, and he knew his days of holding back were over. And everything looks the same and different. And he has one of those epiphanies in front of the clocks outside Central on Elizabeth Street, next to a guy selling the big issue. That regardless of where his car took him and what he didn't end up finding, he's part of this city too. And he realises that they're all laughing and that he'd said it all out loud. "Shut up, Jimmy." And the girls link their arms with his, and Mackie takes Jimmy's duffel, and he's so overwhelmed by them, and the city, and being home, and he forgets why he's really here, and just lets it all settle in, that he's home. And they take him to a cafe and fill him in on what he hasn't heard in phone calls, that Justine's still in fucking Melbourne. "It's what we call it now," Frankie tells him, "because we're sick of hearing how cool it is down there and how fantastic the music scene is and how it's less expensive than Sydney and Melbourne, fucking Melbourne," Tara says. "The whole of Queensland got the treatment while you were there," Mackie explains. "Jimmy's in fucking Queensland, we tell people, and because Siobhan's still in London, it's fucked as well, and so is wherever the fucking Europe will is." "Stuttgart," Frankie tells him. "Fucking Stuttgart." And Jimmy can't help laughing because they do idiotic conversations better than anyone he knows. "So you're staying with us?" Tara says. "One of our housemates is in Pakistan, so you get his room," Mackie adds. He's wearing a tie, which isn't really a Tom Mackie thing to do. "What's with the noose?" Jimmy asks. "Brace yourself," Frankie says. "Because Tom goes by the title Sir these days," Tara tells him. "Teaching?" Jimmy's more than surprised. "Mate, no." "He got his diphead last year," Tara says. "He's back to wearing the sexy design and technology apron and goggles." "Oh, come on, Tara. Do you have to tell people what we get up to in the bedroom?" Tara's laughing, and it's good to see. Because 2 years ago, when Jimmy was last in Sydney, Mackie and Tara were feeling their way around being together, and it all seemed raw. And they don't stop talking for hours. And later, he can't even remember what it was they spoke about. All they want to hear is what he's been up to in better detail than they get over the phone. So Jimmy tells him how he's driving dump trucks for the mines, and he tries to pretend that Tara isn't about to have a major brain freeze at the mention of mines, and that he's working 1 week on, 1 week off, and how the company flies him to Brisbane, but anywhere else is at his expense. And he's talking a mile a minute about town hopping and how he got his big vehicle licence, and how he really wants to save up enough so he can get into the paramedics one day. And when Jimmy's covered everything, he figures it's time to tell them why he's really in Sydney. Apart from wanting to see them after a 2-year good behaviour bond kept him in Queensland. "Promise you won't freak out?" Wrong way to start things because Frankie's about to have a meltdown. "I'm not dying and I'm not going to jail." "Probably should have started with that," Mackie says. For a moment he's silent. He's only had 5 days to process this himself. "I got a girl pregnant," he says. For the first time since he got off the train, there's silence. "Is she going through with it?" Mackie finally asks. "She's already had it," he says. The silence this time is a beat longer. "Why didn't you tell us?" Frankie asks, and Jimmy can hear the hurt. "Because I didn't know, mate." He has to start somewhere, but even in his own head, he hasn't worked out where. "I met her about 2 years ago up north during the floods. We went our separate ways. Apparently, she got pregnant. Remember when I changed phone numbers about a year ago because I couldn't find my phone? Well, I found it in my duffel bag when I returned to Rockhampton a year after she contacted me. He's 15 months old." "How do you know it's yours?" Tara asks. "Because she says it is." There's more silence after that. "I don't know how to pronounce his name," he says, because everything feels so intense. "You're going to have to help me here, Frankie. It's Toto." Jimmy tries to say it the way he heard it over the phone when he spoke to Rosie, but seems to fail. "You got an Italian girl pregnant?" Frankie asks. "Yes, and you're not going to believe where she lives," he says. "Haberfield. So I better go see her sooner rather than later." Mackie's nodding in agreement. "Nothing worse than bumping into a girl you knocked up while stuffing your face with the Italian cheesecake at Papa's." And it all seems wrong, but they're pissing themselves laughing. Mackie and Tara take him home to the 2-story Victorian terrace they rent, across from the railway line in Petersham. They share it with 2 friends, one who's overseas and the other who's out bush for 6 months. Mackie leads him up the stairs and hands him a towel from the linen cupboard. "You know you can stay as long as you want, mate," he says. It's heartfelt, no matter how it's delivered. And it's the thing that Jimmy's worked out about his relationship with Mackie, that their connection is strong, despite the lack of dialogue between them. Before the girls came along in Year 11, they had never exchanged a word, nor had the girls. And they'd come over from the same school. Frankie said the 6 of them were the loneliest people in the world until they became a group. But even then, Jimmy and Mackie only got to know each other in fragments, until a couple of years back when Jimmy disappeared from their lives and Mackie tracked him down and asked for help working on a community building project in Walgett with Tom's father and grandpop. Working with them was tough at first because the Mackies were dealing with their own shit, and most times it was Jimmy who did the talking. Mackie's dad later wrote to say that Jimmy had filled in the silence for them, and it made all the difference. In the shower, he can hear the rumble of their voices, and he's comforted by the sound. He hasn't lived in a house since Frankie's place more than 2 years ago. It's been a whole lot of motel rooms and boarding houses and makeshift accommodations out at the mines. In the kitchen, Mackie is cooking, and Tara has work spread out on the dining table. Her computer sounds a Skype ringtone just as Jimmy sits down. "That was quick," Tara says. "Siobhan." Jimmy owes Siobhan a couple of phone calls, so he goes straight into an apology when her face appears on the screen. She's been working in London for the past 5 years on a British passport because her mum was born there. She was the screw-up when they were at school. Now she has her life worked out better than any of them, and dishes out advice and threats from the other side of the world. "Can we just skip the pleasantries while I find the one key word that's gone through my head since Frankie texted?" she says. "Brace yourself," Mackie says from the sink. "Condom!" "They didn't hear you in Sheffield, Siobhan," Mackie calls out. "And he's working for the mines as well," Tara says, leaning over Jimmy's shoulder. "Go ahead, ruin the environment and knock up girls you met in floods," Siobhan says. "She is the flood chick, isn't she?" Tom sings a couple of lines about floods and fools as he chops up the veggies. "And have you spoken to Frankie?" Siobhan asks. "About what?" "About Will?" "None of our business, Siobhan," Tara says, but Mackie is sitting next to Jimmy now, so it seems serious. "Well, he's in Germany and she's here," Mackie says. "And the deal was that they'd both be living overseas together for a year." "Talk to her, Jimmy," Siobhan says. Later, the 3 of them sit on the front veranda eating Mackie's tacos and drinking beer, accompanied by the rattle of the trains. Tara is telling them about her work at Barangaroo and how it's part of the C40 Cities Climate Program. Her passion for urban renewal comes through in every word she speaks. The pay's shit, but it's an amazing opportunity. How can you afford to keep this place? We sort of can't, Tara says. But I'm working full-time and Tom is still getting shifts at the union as well as casual teaching, so we managed to make the rent. We share a mobile phone and go without pay TV, Mackie informs him. Which means we watched the first episode of Game of Thrones at my parents' place last week, Tara says. Where Jamie and Cersei declared their familial love for each other, Mackie added, never again. A train rattles by, and it lulls them into silence. A comfortable one. And Jimmy wonders if this is what Mackie and Tara do when they're alone. Sit side by side on an ancient vinyl couch without the need to fill the silence with banal talk. Much later, they head back inside. I thought she was just some girl you met and forgot, Mackie says, as if he's been thinking about it all this time. Jimmy shrugs. Were you in love with her? Tara asks. Didn't know her long enough. She was a train wreck. I was one. A good fit. He takes one of the buses that travels along Parramatta Road and walks down to the Haberfield shops. He's been here once or twice with Frankie, mostly to pick up Italian sweets or groceries for her grandmother, who won't get her homemade pasta or deli food from anywhere else. It's a couple of blocks of the essentials, a news agency, dry cleaners, cafes, restaurants and pasticcerias. They're mostly grassroots businesses, like the Hole-in-the-Wall Bakery or the IGA. It hasn't had a makeover like plenty of the other main streets in the inner west, and he figures that's the way the locals want things. Rosie's place is on Dalhousie Street, and he needs to check his phone for the number. Finds the house soon enough. A small cottage surrounded by pretty impressive Federation homes. In the front yard is a tiny box garden of wild grass and flowers that gives it an unkempt feel, contradicted by the homeliness of the veranda, where a couple of cane armchairs, same as those outside the Queenslander houses up in the Burdekin, sit a small ceramic table between them. Like Mackie and Tara's train-watching vinyl couch, they speak of home. He rings the doorbell and regrets it a moment later because he figures he's woken up the baby. When no one answers, he peers through one of the windows and between the curtains. Jimmy can see a fireplace with a cuckoo clock above it. He walks across to the other window and realises he's looking into someone's bedroom. What are you doing? Behind him, a woman is standing at the gate, unimpressed. She's dressed in a suit, obviously home from work, judging from the oversized bag she's holding. She's sort of beautiful in an older woman way, but Jimmy's too intimidated by her hostility to ponder the beauty. Rosie never mentioned parents, so he doesn't know how the two are related. I'm looking for Rosie, he says. She continues to stare at him without responding. Can you let her know I'm here? I'm not her receptionist. He's about to turn and head home, but knows he has to work out the truth sooner or later. I think it's important that I see them. Jimmy notices a flash of realisation. She's just made the connection and couldn't look more unimpressed, shouldering him out of the way to unlock the door. Although there's no invitation to follow, Jimmy steps inside after her. She disappears into the bedroom, so he walks into the room with the fireplace, wondering if he's meant to wait. It's small, so the TV's mounted on a cream-coloured wall to save space, and there's a 3-seater sitting the right distance away. He likes a cuckoo clock, maybe a bit kitsch, but he figures the Made in Germany label means it's the real thing. When he figures that no one is returning for him, Jimmy explores the house. Apart from the bathroom, the rest of the place is an open-plan kitchen and living area with impressive Jarrah floorboards. Jimmy's worked with Bob Spinelli on properties around the city, and Mackie's a carpentry freak, so he's been dragged to enough timber recycling sheds to appreciate how the red tinge of the wood works well with the colours surrounding it. Although he sees the wood's imperfections, the polish makes him want to take off his shoes. His favourite thing about the place is the natural light, coming through a couple of French doors at the back, enviable after some of the places Jimmy's lived in. He's just about to look outside when he hears a sound above him. Walks to the foot of a narrow staircase where he sees Rosie standing at the top. He makes his way to her, and they stand before each other for the first time in 2 years. When Jimmy met Rosie that time up north, her hair was cropped and he couldn't keep his eyes off her face, stared at her for at least half an hour before he had the guts to approach. He remembers the singlet and shorts she was wearing and the colour of her skin, and the way she folded her arms while she was listening to the information being handed out. Jimmy honestly thought that a pasty-skinned, bushy-bearded weirdo in orange work gear didn't stand a chance. Her hair's longer now, shoved back in a ponytail, and looking like it hasn't been washed in weeks. Her dark eyes are accentuated by darker circles. Even so, if he walked into a pub today and saw her standing there, he'd still wait 30 minutes to take a chance. The thump of his heart gives that away. She's studying him now, and Jimmy wonders what she's looking for. Resemblance to her child? A disbelief that she ever saw anything in him? Behind her, he sees another living area, different from downstairs. Toys and cushions scattered over the floor, a sofa covered by an old sheet, and a bag with nappies spilling out. The back end of the room is the best thing about it. Wall-to-wall glass with a view of the backyard. From where he's standing, Jimmy can see a mess of a garden. "How have you been?" he asks. She doesn't respond. "Like I said on the phone," he says, "I'm sorry it took so long. I lost my mobile." "You lose a lot of things." He remembers once how they were lying in bed and talking about the stolen Monaro. Jimmy's suddenly overcome by the memory, the sex, the chemistry, the sorrow of that town. A cry interrupts the silence between them, and Rosie disappears into the next room. Jimmy's pulse is going for it, because he's not ready for this. He hears murmuring and the crying stops, and she reappears, holding the kid who looks heavy in her arms. A good-looking baby, caramel hair, and same-coloured eyes. He starts crying again when he sees Jimmy, and Rosie balances him on her hip and grabs a baby bottle that's lying on a milk crate. "Have you ever held one of these?" she wants to know. Jimmy doesn't respond, and that's how they spend the hour. No one speaking and a baby wailing. One that looks absolutely nothing like Jimmy. "I'll come back tomorrow if you like," he says. "Up to you." The next day he gets there earlier so he doesn't have to deal with the hostile woman in the suit. This time it's Rosie who answers the door. "Are you okay?" he asks. "Why wouldn't I be?" Because she's in her pyjamas at 11 o'clock in the morning, and yesterday she was in the same pyjamas at 5:30 in the afternoon. Jimmy follows her upstairs where the baby is crying again. She disappears inside the bedroom to get him. "Who lives here with you?" he calls out. "Is it your mum?" She comes out holding the baby. The now ear-piercing screeching is taking swipes at Jimmy's temples. "As if I look anything like her." True, the woman is fair-skinned and blue-eyed, but she doesn't seem the type to be renting out her attic space, so Jimmy figures she's somehow related. "She was my father's other wife." Was could mean two things about Rosie's father, divorced or dead. He goes for the latter. "It's a great space," he says. "It doesn't look this big outside." "My father did it himself." "He was a builder?" "No." She holds out the crying kid for Jimmy to take, but he doesn't. "When he gets used to me, maybe," he says. Rosie cradles a sobbing baby, but it doesn't seem to help. And that's it for the day. No more talking, just a lot of standing around and soaking in the mess. He takes a bus out to Waterloo, back to the Housing Commission block of flats where he lived most of his life. 13 floors of misery, his mum used to say. Jimmy doesn't know whether that's true now, but it was a place of fear for him then. Not for his life, but for hers. He remembers the older kids who used to sell ciggies in the toilet block. They'd tell him that the newspaper called this place Suicide Towers. From that moment on, until his mum left him behind, Jimmy was convinced she'd walk up to the roof and throw herself off. The area had changed now, more hipsters moving in, and a lot more families with better lives than theirs. Maybe that's not a bad thing, but it depresses Jimmy, makes his life feel even more forgotten. His phone rings and it's Frankie. "Are you okay?" she asks. "Are you?" "Come over tonight, my mum's asking about you." Jimmy enjoys the idea of being asked after. There'd been moments in the past 2 years where he'd felt himself disappearing off the grid. Later that afternoon, when Mia Spinelli opens the door, she hugs Jimmy with that intensity and promise that he's always found in his embraces with this family. When he first met them in Year 11, Mia was suffering depression, and Frankie was dealing with her only spiral into something close to it. For some reason, he connected with Mia during her illness. She calls him her second son, and he wishes it were true, wishes these people weren't his on loan. Even Nonna Anna, who's staying with them because she's had a hip replacement, welcomes Jimmy as if he belongs to them. "Too skinny," she says, her accent heavy with warmth. He does the rounds with Frankie, dropping off her brother Luca, who's doing a health science degree and working part-time at one of the local primary schools at their after-hours daycare, then taking Will's grandmother to physio before heading into work to pick up her pay. "Are you and Will okay?" he asks, because he figures that if she's hanging out with Will's family, everything should be fine. The two have been a thing for 8 years, have been in love for even longer. Jimmy isn't one to live through other people's relationships, but he can't fathom the idea of them not making it. Their public displays of affection may be too much, but they're the sort of people who rarely fall out with friends or relatives. Despite Will being an introvert and Frankie being an exact opposite, they have a great friendship, an enviable one. 3 years ago, when Jimmy was in Sydney, he felt as if he really got to know Will, and he still receives a text at least once a month asking, "Have you found the Monaro?" "Who's saying we're not?" Frankie asks. "No one," he sort of lies. "But he's in Germany and you aren't." "We've been apart before," she says. "I thought the plan was that you'd live overseas together." "We will," she says. "But I'm in the middle of sorting things out and I can't just pick up and take off." Jimmy leaves it at that because he can tell she's getting irritated. She parks in a no-standing zone at King Street Wharf, where the clubs and restaurants line the road, and tells him to keep an eye out for parking police while she runs in to grab her pay. He can't keep count of how many jobs she has these days. "You must be knackered, mate," he says when she returns. "I'm still paying off my HEX loan, my credit card, my phone, plus I need to save." Jimmy's noticed that everyone's talking about saving money or paying off loans and stuff they didn't seem to worry about a couple of years ago. He doesn't know how to be part of that yet. He may understand what he wants to do for a living, but he doesn't have a plan that takes him into a financial future. It just hasn't been a priority. These past 18 months, he's made good money, and he's learnt to spend good money on flying up to the Cape to fish, on watching the V8 supercars in Townsville, on grog. "We're not 24 anymore, Jimmy." "I can't see the big difference between being 24 and 25. "Quarter of a century," she says. Back at Frankie's place, he has dinner with the family. Here, it's always chatty, as if they haven't been together for weeks and need to fill each other in on fragments of their day that are neither trivial or profound, but provide him with a comfort beyond words. There's constant talk over each other, but no one gets irate. Tonight, it's a switch from English to Italian and back again, but Jimmy doesn't know whether they're translating for him or Mia's mother. They are known to each other in a way Jimmy's family wasn't. When his grandpop died, the old guy was still a mystery to him, an angry man who raised a broken daughter, who walked away from Jimmy because she woke up one morning and couldn't find a way out of that life, except to leave. It's what she told him that time he tracked her down in Lismore. Jimmy is certain of two things: that he was no better off with the old guy, and that his mother's decision to leave led him to this table. For that, he's grateful. After dinner, Frankie heads off to the UTS library and promises to be back in a couple of hours. Jimmy helps Bob wash up and then sits with Mia, who's marking a batch of uni essays. "Have you seen him?" she asks, and he doesn't question to whom she's referring. Jimmy nods. "And Rosie? Is that her name?" "Yeah, Rosanna." "What's her surname? We may know the family." "I have no idea," he says, "and I don't know how to bring it up without sounding like a dick." "Then ask her the baby's full name." Simple solution. Why didn't he think of that? "I don't think she's coping," he says. "I recognise the signs and I want to do the right thing, you know. I don't want to let her down." "But?" He looks up, meets her eyes, because he can pretty much bullshit anyone, including himself, but not Mia Spinelli. "I don't know if he's mine." And Jimmy feels like a bastard saying that. Has no idea what he owes Rosie, but it's not calling her a liar. Then find out. Regardless of where you want to go with this, You can't have that question lingering every time you're with them. She Googles something on her laptop and scribbles it down on a post-it note. Tell her to ring one of these numbers. They know how to deal with babies and mums. He takes a post-it note, but can't imagine Rosie appreciating him talking about her with other people. Frankie comes home and they head down to meet Tara and Mackie at the union. Jimmy is meant to fly out tomorrow, and his head is no clearer than it was a couple of days ago when he arrived. Are you coming back? Mackie asks. The room's there for you, Tara says. Jimmy's relieved by the offer because it makes going away a lot easier. But it's the fear of returning to Sydney and Rosie's house that keeps him awake. And he's frightened of the weak, reckless side of him that wants to return up north to stuff things up, good and proper, so that it'll be more than a good behaviour bond keeping him from ever coming home again. Chapter 4. The crying is endless. It's a sound that has embedded itself into the part of her head that can't block noise out anymore. She wakes to it, showers to it, walks the streets to it, breathes in rhythm to it, and Rosie takes the blame for it all. 10 weeks of not giving a shit what she drank or smoked or what pills she took while he was in her belly. When he was born, she thought Toto had escaped any of the damage she did, because the nurses said he was perfect. But Rosie was kidding herself because that's what she does. Today she leaves the house because Tuesday has incentives. It's the day that gives her a reason to get out of her pyjamas and have a shower, because the mornings are the worst, and most days she talks herself out of walking down the stairs. Most days there are too many people to avoid, Martha downstairs or Teresa next door. She seems to have a radar that detects the moment Rosie and Toto hit the pavement. Rosie, why don't you come in and... Rosie keeps pushing the pram up Dalhousie, but really she wants to turn back and tell Teresa exactly what she thinks of her. For forgetting Rosie's mum the moment she died all those years ago, even though they were best friends. For welcoming the second wife with open arms too soon after. Rosie hears them outside the window, Teresa and Marco and Martha chatting away about the house mostly. As if the house, like their neighbours, belonged to Martha from the beginning, when it was Rosie's mum who came first. She passes St Joan of Arc's church. An old Signora bitch-face from across the road is gossiping to one of her cronies, giving Rosie the evil eye. Fuck you all, she wants to say. Toto is crying again, and she wants to yell the same thing to him, and it makes her feel like a monster. And she's crying as she pushes the pram, praying she won't do something to hurt Toto. Like those women who drive their kids into lakes or leave them behind in hot cars for hours. She keeps on hearing Min's voice in her head. What are you going to do with your life, Rosie? So she's been trying to move forward. She went to Leichhardt Library a couple of weeks ago and found an advertisement on the community notice board for those who didn't get to join a mother's group when their baby was born. That's where she ends up on Tuesdays. Meeting at an old church in Lilyfield with at least 9 other mothers, 3 who are vying for leadership. Passive-aggressive Katerina, Yolanda the foghorn, and cardio mum, who's determined that everyone is going to lose post-baby fat. A few of the others seem friendly, but they don't want to commit to the first person who smiles at them, in case someone better comes along. 1 or 2 don't contribute at all, like the mum sitting beside Rosie who checks her phone every time it beeps, as if missing a tweet is going to ruin her life, or the Chinese girl who hasn't spoken a word. Rosie finds them all irritating. She's either ignored or paid too much attention. Oh, you're so young, passive-aggressive Katerina says, as if it's something to be sympathetic about. She reminds Rosie of the girls in the neighbourhood who used to bitch about what she was getting up to with their brothers and cousins, rather than what their brothers and cousins were getting up to with her. He's so big for his age. Definitely a reprimand from cardio mum, who Rosie is convinced has already put her baby on a diet. The woman's first question every week has been, is he walking yet? And then in that first week, the topic she most dreads comes up, the exchange of when did you stop breastfeeding stories. By the time they get to Rosie, some of the others are in tears from the trauma of moving on to formula. I didn't breastfeed, she says. It was too painful. Oh, you poor thing. Rosie's grateful for even a bit of patronising sympathy from passive-aggressive Katerina until she realises the woman is talking to Toto. Had Rosie given up too soon? Her mother would have endured the bleeding and scabby nipples. Her mother endured years of cancer. "Where's the next meeting?" Rosie asks. "We'll put things up on the Facebook page," Katerina says. It seems as though it's only on a need-to-know basis, as if they're a group of operatives who have something to hide. "I'm not on Facebook," Rosie says. "Could someone text me?" No one commits to doing that. Cardio Mum tells them about a Mums with Gloves program she's starting up at one of the parks just off the Bay Run, and then goes into nutrition news again to help anyone who wants to lose the baby fat. Yolanda bristles through the whole spiel. And then there's Toto's incessant crying. It stops conversation most times, produces strained smiles from the others that don't quite reach their eyes. Yolanda pulls Rosie aside when she goes to make herself an instant coffee. She's an Indigenous woman who's just moved to Sydney from Moree with her partner, and apart from bristling whenever Cardio Mum speaks, Yolanda's brought up how crap Sydney is about 3 times now. "It's his teeth," Yolanda tells her. "What?" "Your bub. He's crying because of his teeth." "He's never had trouble with his teeth," Rosie says. "But the molars are painful, and you should—" "It's none of your business, Yolanda." "I don't like your tone." Obviously, a teacher. Rosie's history with teachers is worse than her history with girls from the neighbourhood. Before they leave, Katerina wants a photo of all the babies together because she thinks they're the most culturally diverse mothers group in the area and is patting herself on the back for bringing them together. But Rosie goes back each Tuesday regardless, because it's company, because some days she just needs to speak to someone other than Toto. A few of the mums are close to going back to work soon, and there's a lot of talk about professions, banking, pharmaceuticals, IT. It's yet another question Rosie dreads. They bypass some of the others, but Katerina insists that someone Rosie's age must have a story. "I've enrolled in a nursing degree," she lies. She's inquired about it anyway, researched it online at the library. Next time they ask, she'll fill in the details about how she's thinking of midwifery because of Min during the floods. But today, after 4 weeks of Mother's Group, they aren't there. 9 women with prams, the United Nations of the Inner West, on the run from Rosie. So she takes a bus to the city for the first time with Toto, worried that she won't be able to get the pram on and off in time. But a couple of people help her when she gets off at UTS. She heads to the Student Association and browses the pamphlets outside the door. Takes one about free legal advice for UTS students. Once inside, a guy her age helps her download an application form, and she wants to weep with gratitude because kindness disarms her these days. Lachlan, or Lockie as he likes to be called, is doing a Bachelor of Mathematics and Computing. Beautiful straight teeth and a great smile. Tells her to come back on Thursday and he'll help with the application. Rosie contemplates the offer in his eyes, because he doesn't seem to be fazed by a sleeping baby, and as far as she's concerned, she doesn't owe SES Jesus anything. But that afternoon he turns up on her doorstep. He says something about working in the mines up north, 1 week on, 1 week off, but Rosie figures that's just some bullshit lie. She can tell he's not interested in Toto, hasn't touched him once, and the moment he walks up those stairs he's itching to leave. He doesn't have the beard anymore. It softened him. During the floods, it made him look kind. She hears a ringtone, not hers, because Rosie doesn't get phone calls. "Jimmy here?" he says, and then he mumbles to whomever he's speaking to. The fragments she knows about him begin to disappear. "You're Jimmy, not Jim," she says, when he hangs up. "My friends call me Jimmy." Toto doesn't want to be contained because he's tasted the freedom that feet bring him, and he wants more. In Rosie's arms, he headbutts her, and for a moment she's stunned by the force of it, but she doesn't let on. "Do you want me to call you Jim or Jimmy?" she asks. "You can call me whatever you want." She remembers the night during the floods lying beside him when he didn't shut up. Now she gets short, abrupt statements and little else. Rosie hates small talk, hates people who force her to indulge in it. But that's who she's become now, someone satisfied by the mundane. The girl who pushes prams through shopping centres just to enjoy the pace of a flat surface because it calms her. "I won a raffle at Marketplace," she tells him. I've got a portrait of Toto and they're giving me 3 copies, so you can have one. He's pretty photogenic. Rosie holds the baby out to him, but Jim's hands stay at his side. So she puts Toto on the floor and lets him try to walk. He falls, hits his head, and starts to cry. "I'm sorry," she whispers, holding him tight. "I'm sorry," because it's all she can say to him these days. "Are you sure he's mine?" Jim's words clench something in her gut. "Why would you ask that?" "Because he looks nothing like me." "Toto's yours," she says. Apart from the coldness in Jim's voice, there's also pity in his eyes. "How can you be sure, Rosie?" "Trust me, he looks like you. When he smiles, he looks just like you." "He doesn't." Toto jumps in her arms, his little heart beating fast, and that's it for Rosie. Gennaros don't beg. It was her father's golden rule. She takes Toto into the bedroom, puts him down in the cot, then returns. "I want you to leave," she says. "You don't respect me, and I don't need that in Toto's life. I told you he was yours because I know how you felt about your mother not letting your father be part of your life. You said any man should have the right to know." He doesn't respond, and she shoves him. "If you don't want to be part of this, then go away, Jimmy, or whatever the fuck your name is. I don't want your darkness in his life." "I'm worried about you, Rosie," he says. He takes something out of his pocket, a post-it note with a couple of phone numbers on it. "These people might be able to help." "Why would you care?" "Because I just do. You don't even know me. I'm just some girl you picked up who you think is a liar." After she manages to put Toto down for a sleep, she heads to the kitchen to organise food. It's the Heinz stuff from the supermarket for the time being, because she doesn't have it in her to prepare anything else. She hears the front door open and starts to head upstairs. There's an unspoken rule between them not to be in the same room. But Rosie stops herself, because this is her house, her kitchen. Bruno comes down the stairs and walks towards Martha, but Rosie calls him back and sends him up again. Martha puts the groceries down on the butcher's trolley, her icy blue stare on Rosie for the first time since Rosie's returned. She's darkened her blonde hair lately. When Rosie first saw her in that cancer ward all those years ago, she thought Martha was a good witch Glinda from The Wizard of Oz. Something's changed over the years. Same land, different witch. Rosie wants to be the first to speak because she needs that control. "Where's my father's wedding ring?" Martha seems surprised by the question. "In my jewellery box." "I mean his real wedding ring." Martha's eyes meet hers. When it comes to staring, Rosie can win this, almost. "No disrespect to your mother, Rosie, but I do consider my marriage to your father the real thing." "I don't give a shit, Martha. Where have you put my parents' stuff?" "You took most of your mum's things when you left. And what right did you have taking down photos of my mother in the living room?" Once again, no disrespect to Loredana, but why would I have photos of her in a house that I've been the sole occupant of for almost 3 years? "Because it's my house." "Yes, but also mine. I've lived here for 6 years, Rosie. Your father and I worked on it together, both of us. He didn't just work on it alone." Together. Us. When those words come out of Martha's mouth, Rosie wants to slap her hard. "My father never worked on this house alone before my mother died. It was the 3 of us." And all Rosie can see in the kitchen now is a photo of Martha and her father stuck on the fridge. Must have been taken just before he died. The only photo she has with her parents is from around the year 2000, before her mother was diagnosed, when Rosie was 10. The house was still a shell back then, but it didn't matter because they were happy, as if nothing could break them. "I've already seen a solicitor and they said I have the right to this house over you," Rosie says. "You need to move out." "That's not true and you know it." "Then I'll take you to court." "With what, Rosie?" "My nonna in Italy's given me money." "Eugenia doesn't have money." "You know nothing about my family," Rosie says. "Eugenia would do anything for me to have this house because it was built for my mother and me." Rosie watches Martha fill up the kettle with water and switch it on, as if she's calm but her hands are shaking. "You want me out of here, Rosie?" Then how are you going to manage a mortgage? The house doesn't have a mortgage. Martha shakes her head with disbelief. Of course it has a mortgage. My father worked on this house for years without getting into debt. Rosie, they didn't have health insurance. Any money he made went to paying your mum's hospital bills. Don't blame my mother. Upstairs, Toto wakes up and is wailing. Rosie sees Martha's eyes flicker towards the sound. How about we have this discussion when you've had a bit more sleep, Martha says. I don't want you living here with us. Then we'll sell the house, Rosie. Rosie is stunned to hear the words. Is that what you want? Because we both can't afford to buy each other out. I'm not moving. This is Toto's home. Toto's cry turns into a blood-curdling sound. Seb said, Rosie doesn't want to hear another word about what her father and Martha said or did together. She grabs the photo off the fridge and tears it in pieces. She sees Martha's teeth clench. Go and calm him down. Fuck you, Martha. What would you know about calming down babies? And then the Groundhog Day begins again, with wailing, with Teresa next door calling out to her, with Signora outside St. Joan of Arc's, reprimand in her eyes, watching Rosie push that pram, with the realisation that SES Jesus is another disappointment in a line of useless guys in her life. And to top it all off, she picks up the portraits of Toto at Marketplace and sees the mothers group laughing in a cafe on Marion Street, without her. And back in the only place that makes sense to Rosie, she closes her eyes to the sound of crying, and in the end she doesn't know if it's Toto's or hers. Chapter 5. If it's Seb who instructs Martha during the day, it's her mother Lottie who wakes her up most mornings. It's usually with a gentle order, sometimes a reminder to ring Oberammergau because it's Tante Christiana's birthday, or that it'd be rude not to take up Vula Kolotos's offer to join the family this Greek Easter. For the past 2 days, Lottie has raised concerns about the silence upstairs. Come on, Ornish she whispers in her ear. So Martha finally gives in and follows her mother's voice up those steps. But there's no one there, and it makes her stomach churn. Rosie disappearing 2 years ago was one thing, but this time she's taken a baby with her and left Bruno behind. He's sitting at the bottom of the stairs, brooding, while Suki's in Martha's bedroom, dying. At work, a brief lands on her desk. She stares at it a moment before heading to the Chief of Staff's office. Can you get someone else to do this? She asks Matthew Soloway. He wants Martha to report back to the minister later in the week about her findings, as if they're supposed to be a profound one. People drink and drive. Loved ones die. Everyone's devastated. End of story. Martha can't understand the need to spin it into something more than that. How about I work on the firearms policy and Leon takes over with this? She asks. Martha should let him know that Leon is in over his head with the firearms policy, but it's not her style to report one of her team. How about you continue working on what I gave you, Martha? Out at training that night, she's relieved to be pumping blood into her brain. She likes a lapse the most. Sometimes it's the only peace and quiet she's had all day, but then one of the others will catch up and they get to talk and she'll enjoy that as well. Tonight it's Alana giving her the rundown on being principal at a new school out west, and how hard it's been balancing Julia and the kids with all the students at school, but sometimes she sees a glimmer of results. Martha loves people's passion for their work. She doesn't feel a passion for hers, but a commitment. Hers is a job of great emotion, controlled by useless bureaucracy. This week it's a backlash against the revenue cash cow of speed cameras. Road carnage is the hardest topic for Martha to deal with. So spending today reading emails from grieving parents and partners and siblings and neighbours and friends of those who've been killed or damaged beyond repair has her dancing at the edge of something dangerous. She doesn't want to be so committed anymore. Ewan catches up while she runs her third lap. "Two's enough," he says. And there it is. The resonance of his voice that brings a pleasure beyond words. "I need to say something, and I don't want you to react," he says. And she knows that it's a yes please to whether she'll go out with him. No beating around the bush this time. You know you don't have to preface everything with, I need to say something, although I find it very endearing, she says. She can't help smiling because that's what she does in his presence. So you're going to be okay about not playing centre? He asks. Because honestly, Martha puts up a hand to stop him speaking, because if she doesn't give it a purpose at the moment, it might just slap his face. I've mapped it all out and you need to be in the defence position because of your height and your intimidating demeanour. Martha points to the others who are doing push-ups on the freshly cut grass, like a squadron out of a G.I. Jane movie. I think I come in a close fourth when it comes to intimidating demeanour. You're tall and I need you as a goal defender, he says. Now he's speaking to her as though she's one of his ex-footy players. I was invited into this team to play centre or shooter, Ewan, and if I don't get to play those positions, I'm walking away. For crying out loud, Martha. Don't you for crying out loud Martha me. She breaks into a sprint that she regrets about 10 metres in. Forced to slow down, it leaves him with two options, pass her or jog alongside her. So what are my chances of taking you out to dinner now? He says, going for the latter. And that's the humiliating part. His chances haven't diminished at all. Saturday night, he says. Food, film, footy, or stop with the Fs or I'm going home. He laughs into a cough because the others are watching them approach. What happened out there? His sister asks. Martha checks a stitch. He told me I can't play centre. The others are outraged. Martha's sort of flattered, surprised. Honestly, you're a C-bomb, Ewan, Elizabeth says. Are we playing for the Sydney Swifts or the Commonwealth Games? Alana asks. As if it matters who plays what, Sophie argues. Ewan's unimpressed by their wrath. I don't train a team to lose or to catch up and chat, he says. And don't be fooled into thinking people in this comp are ready to be put out to pasture. We could do without the cow references, Ewan, Elizabeth says. Martha's playing goalkeeper, he tells them. Because if she was standing in front of me with a hand to my face while I was trying to score, I'd crumble. His face reddens under everyone's scrutiny. After a moment, Martha gets the same treatment from the others, but there's no blushing from her because she thinks it's all pretty funny. They go for a drink at Rower's, still berating him. Not as much as one of the patrons ordering at the bar who recognises Ewan and decides to approach. You ruin that club, you arsehole, the woman says, two small kids at her side. Greed ruined that club, fool, Julia says. Martha would pay good money to take a Julia masterclass on how to use that word so calmly and with as much edge, especially when the trio of Ewan haters walked away with a bit less puff in their steam. And shame on you for using that language in front of your kids, Alana shouts out after the woman. She turns back to Ewan. It's been 6 months. How much fucking longer do you have to put up with this? Martha's seen enough coverage on the news to know Ewan's been called worse. George reckons you should have challenged the board instead of walking away, Sophie says. George is an accountant, Sophie, Julia says. I'd like to see him go and challenge his board. Ewan clearly doesn't want to discuss it, and they head to a table out back. He sits opposite Martha, and she likes the eye contact they make once in a while. You're coming to work for me, Alana says to him. Christ, he mutters. My staff are taking a group of our best players on a 4-day sports camp and I want you running it. Lance, I've got funding, Ewan. She's asking because you're good, not because you're desperate, his sister says. It's obvious that Alana and Julia have rehearsed this. What else are you going to do? Sit at home and wallow when disadvantaged kids would appreciate your expertise, Alana asks. You are the first to say that you can't stand the disadvantaged kids label, he accuses her. I said I can't stand the Western Suburbs disadvantaged kids label, she says. But you use it every single time you want something for that school. Do you know how I get results? By handpicking my staff, and my number one criteria is passion. You've still got it. Elizabeth returns with a tray of drinks, handing them out. He doesn't want to be known as the has-been NRL coach saving the kids of the Western Suburbs. Yeah, thanks, Elizabeth, he says dryly. They don't need saving, Alana says. They need funding and opportunity. Martha can see Ewan is caving in. So when is it? He asks. This weekend? Ewan and Martha's eyes meet again. Well, there goes your effing Saturday night, Ewan, she says. He laughs. And Martha realises that she looks forward to these training nights, not only because of you and Healy, but because she misses talking to people about important things like education and foster care and big messy families and veggie patches and food, over unapologetic glasses of wine that don't lead to fatalities. At home, she calls out, hoping for a response, but there's none. Bruno looks depressed, but not as bad as Suki. While Martha's trying to coax her to eat, the doorbell rings and she's desperately hoping it's Rosie, despite the fact that she has her own key. Who is it? Jimmy. Who? She realises it's a dropkick boyfriend. Martha would bet her life on the fact that he's a drug dealer. She's not here, Martha tells him, opening the door but keeping the security screen door locked. Do you know when she'll be back? She hasn't been home in 2 days. Where is she? I don't know where she is. Martha goes to close the door, but he stops her. What do you mean you don't know? He asks. You live with them. She lives upstairs. I live downstairs. Rosie's a big girl. She can look after herself. He slams a hand against the screen door. Are you kidding me? Cut the aggression or I'm calling the police. He walks away at the first mention of the cops. Martha's sure he's the one who slashed her tyres. She spends the day with the minister, taking meetings with friends and family of a 19-year-old killed in a car accident on the Pacific Highway. At lunchtime, she attempts another discussion with Matthew Soloway. Just give me the report, Martha, and it'll be done and dusted. Martha inherited an ironclad work ethic from Otto and Lottie and has never walked away from a task. She stays late that night until she finishes writing the report, returning it to Soloway, who is still in his office. I'm taking long service leave, she says. At least that piece of information has him looking up from his work. When? Now. He throws his pen onto the desk and studies her. Is this about Charlie P dying? I know you two are tight, so how about you take a week's stress leave? I'm not taking stress leave. I'm taking the long service leave owed to me, that I've been asking for since October 2009. If I take stress leave, it'll go on my record and then I'll never get another position. Because women my age don't get an advisor to the minister job back if they take stress leave. Calm down, Martha. Don't tell me to calm down. You're shouting and you sound shrill. She grabs a post-it note and writes LSL now in silence. The minister pays her a visit just as Martha is logging off. Matthew says you're having meltdowns all over the office. She counts to 10 because she respects the team too much and doesn't want the story to go around that she told the minister where to go. There are much bigger battles to wage on this job, and she doesn't want to take it out on the overworked. I'm owed 12 months, she says. He shakes his head, irritated. I'll give you 6 weeks family leave just because I'm feeling generous. But next time, plan this in advance. He's not a bad person, neither is Soloway. But if Martha doesn't see them both for a long time, she'll be happy. She stands up, doesn't do it often, but towering over the minister brings her great satisfaction. Can I give you a few next times of my own? She asks. Next time a grieving family comes in with photos of their dead son lying by the side of the road after some coked-up asshole crashes into him, don't send in the widow of a man who died in similar circumstances. She sees his grimace. Shit, Martha. Soloway wasn't thinking. And nor were you. So you better work out a way to replace me temporarily. The messages go off in her bag all the way home, but she ignores her phone. Ignores the look of the guy next to her who has to deal with the vibration against his leg. Her stomach is churning. Not from the confrontation at work, but from the fear of silence in the attic space. Once she's home, Martha's desperate to get inside. Needs to know that Rosie's brought that baby home safe. Rosie! But nothing. Fuck you, Rosie. She searches through Seb's paperwork for any trace of his mother-in-law's phone number in Sicily and finds nothing. On her way back upstairs to go through Rosie's things, she notices Suki's untouched food. Martha knows that this is it, because 17 years with a dog who's never said no to food means it's time. So she collects Suki's bed and one of her toys and drives her up to the vet hospital on Ramsay Street. The nurse recommends that Martha makes a decision sooner rather than later. Bruno's at the door waiting when she returns home. "Go away," she says. Years ago he belonged to Seb and lapped up any attention Martha gave him, but Rosie was always Bruno's favourite, and now Martha refuses to be the substitute. She picks up her phone and reads the messages, lots of worry from the team, mostly because they don't know how to move forward on a brief without her. When the phone rings this time, she notices it's Soloway. 5 months long service leave, he says. All of a sudden the idea of finding something to do for half a year is frightening. "I'll see you in October," she says before hanging up. Rosie's boyfriend is outside the house the next morning. "Are they back?" he asks, his tone a bit more on the polite side. "No." Martha keeps walking and he catches up with her. "Then can you give me—" "Listen," she says, before he can say another word. "The vet's putting down my dog and I don't want to be late." Martha says it very matter of fact. "The vet's putting down the dog. I'm going shopping for some shoes. It's recycling pickup on Tuesday." She walks past her favourite house in the neighbourhood and reaches out and squeezes a stem of lavender, enjoying the scent on her fingers. Even at the worst of times, the street is a comfort to her. Brush-box trees and decorative parapets and timber fences and striped bullnose roofs and wide verandas. Back in the early 1900s, when the suburb was created, they were aiming for harmony with the landscape. The Italians who arrived in the 60s weren't interested in harmony with landscape, just family harmony. So they built accordingly, much to the chagrin of the local historical society. Seb may have arrived in a different decade to the others, but he was at war with the council over his plans to build an attic space. Martha learnt to swear in Italian because of them. At the vet, she sits in a sterile little room with Suki, holds her for a while, whispers into her ear that she was the greatest consolation of her life on too many occasions to count. The vet's lovely, reassuring Martha that Suki won't feel any pain. Out in the foyer, the receptionist speaks in a hushed tone as she tells Martha that it'll cost her $350. Martha takes out her Visa card and hands it over. She's doing a good job of not crying. She lets Otto Newman take over. There's Otto emotion and there's Lottie emotion. All of her life, Martha's chosen which of her parents' personalities to use. Today, it has to be Otto. Except Rosie's idiot boyfriend is there, standing at the lights on Ramsay Street waiting for her. She's about to let fly, but this time he gets in first. "Mate, I'll walk you home," he says. "Thought you might want the company." Martha bursts into tears because her dog is dead and this skinny guy with no sense of boundaries is here to take her home. He puts an arm around her, lets her cry some more. And once back at Dalhousie Street, he makes her pot of English breakfast and finds a Kit Kat in the pantry and gives her half. "Do you think they mightn't come back, Martha?" he asks later, his voice low. "Because I keep going through it in my head and I know she wouldn't leave Bruno. That time in the floods she almost refused to stay at the evac centre because they weren't letting him in. So it's freaking me out, mate. Honest. Because she wasn't coping last time I was here and I didn't make it easy for her and I should have." Since Rosie's return, Martha's tried to work out her movements of the past 2 years. It's come to her in crumbs of information. Now she knows that Rosie was up in Queensland during one of the 2009 floods. "How long were you together?" she asks. 2 weeks? "What's wrong with you kids? It never occurred to you to use a condom?" "It was a strange time," he says. There was a wistfulness in his voice. He feels something for Rosie. Martha can see it. She has a grandmother in Sicily, Eugenia. That's all I know of her, my first name. I don't know whether the baby has a passport. Rosie's phone and her clothes and all the baby's stuff is upstairs. "What about her parents?" he asked. "What happened to them?" "Her mum died when she was 14, cancer, and then Seb was killed when Rosie was just about to turn 18. There's a whole lot of information Martha's left out. 15-year-old Rosie nicking off to live with Seb's mother-in-law in Sicily, refusing to return for more than a year because he got married to Martha. Rosie living with a boyfriend's family when she was 16 because she couldn't stand the sight of Martha in her home. Rosie getting expelled from 2 schools. Rosie lying under her father's coffin stand at the funeral home the night before they buried him. Jimmy, in the floods, must have met a mess of a Rosie. Martha had lived on and off with all that adolescent grief and fury for 3 years. She's lived without it for just as long. But Rosie's absence now is frightening. "How did he die?" Jimmy asks. He stopped on the M4 to help a young guy change a tyre, and some woman off her face on drugs swerved into the car and it crushed him. He reaches out and takes her hand, and Martha wants to cry again because that's what he's turned her into, a sobbing mess. It's people's empathy that always gets her in the end. It's how she bonded with Seb outside the cancer ward. "Do you know if Rosie's got any friends around?" he asks. She shakes her head. "Then why haven't you called the cops?" he asks. And she hears the frustration in his voice. "Doesn't this all make her a missing person with a baby?" "Jimmy, I work with the cops. I know how they operate. If they go looking for Rosie and they figure she's not coping with that baby, they'll involve docs." He stands up abruptly. "Can I look around up there?" Martha lets him because maybe he'll see something she missed. But when the silence upstairs stretches out for too long, she can't help thinking that he's stealing something of Rosie's. It makes Martha feel guilty to think of him as a thief, but she knows nothing about this guy, regardless of him sticking around today. She gives him a few minutes more and then goes to check out what's keeping him. He's in Rosie's room, staring at the photo of the kid on the mantelpiece. It's one of those studio shots, and despite having lived in the same house for more than a couple of weeks now, Martha gets her first good look at the baby. "He's all Seb Gennaro," she says, a catch in her throat. Except that twisted smile. Seb's was a grin. He always seemed as if he was having a joke on the world. Jimmy hasn't spoken yet, and when she finally looks at him, she notices how pale he is. "He was crying every time I saw him," he says. "I didn't get to see the smile, but it's all Gary Haler." It takes a while to understand his mood. "You didn't believe her, did you?" Jimmy shakes his head. She doesn't lie. The exact opposite, really. She's very blunt. Martha studies him. "Was Gary Haler a nice man?" "No, not really. He was okay with me, but he was a shit husband and father, apparently. I don't think he dared try anything with me. He knew I could beat him up." "You don't look the beating up type." He laughs, and she can't help looking back at the photo. "You're wrong," she says. "His smile isn't all Gary Haler. It's yours, Jimmy. You get to claim it." Sophie texts her that night with a "let's catch up, Martha," and because she runs a household, holds down a part-time job, checks in on her sick father every day, and helps out at Scarlett's school, Martha allows herself to be squeezed into Sophie's schedule. It means Saturday morning at Scarlett's gymnastics class, viewed from the mezzanine level and being interrupted by every second person that knows Sophie. She's collected people ever since she could crawl. "But I love you best, darling," she says often enough. It'd break Martha's heart if she found out Sophie was saying that to anyone else. They chat about George and his long hours and his mother who's just flown over to Greece for 6 months. "Thank God for the Peloponnesus," Sophie says every April. And then after she's lulled Martha into the comfort of other people's messy lives, she cuts to the chase. "What's really going on, Martha?" Martha's furious with herself for walking into this trap. She concentrates on Scarlett, who's just on a cartwheel on the beam, and it reminds her of when she and Sophie went through their Nadia Comaneci obsession during the 1976 Olympics, begging their mums to let them be gymnasts. When Sophie asks again, Martha figures it's no use beating around the bush. "Rosie came back with a baby. I quit work for 5 months. Suki's dead. Rosie's disappeared with her baby." Sophie looks taken aback. "Don't worry about me," Martha says. I'm going to Bunnings to buy a tool belt. She stands up and gives Sophie a quick hug. Tell your mum I'll be at Greek Easter. That at least will placate Sophie for the time being. Greek Easter was a week ago, Martha. Martha sits back down, stunned. No quick getaway for her today. Is Vula angry? She asks. Furious. How furious? My mother refused to freeze any leftovers for you, except for the pastitsio, kefteres, yamista, spanakopera and sureki. Martha can't help laughing, and when Sophie goes off to order banana bread to share, she doesn't argue. On her first day off in years, she goes to Bunnings and gets some grout for the tiles. Ends up buying at least $200 worth of other goods because that's the effect Bunnings has on her. She dumps it all in the laundry and makes herself a cup of tea. And then she hears a sound upstairs, a baby's laugh. The relief she feels is beyond words. Bruno comes to greet her, his moping gone, and then he plants himself on the fourth step. Clever dog, Martha mutters, but he gets a treat for being that smart.
This is the end of CD 2. The book continues on CD 3. CD 3.
Chapter 6. Jimmy receives a text from an unknown number. It says, "They're home." He knows it's from Martha, and in the housing on the site that he shares with 3 other guys, he's trying not to react, but his hands are shaking, and there's this part of him that wants to get on a plane and try to make things right. But he doesn't know how. He's bought a DVD with him about an Italian kid who's in love with films. Jimmy watches it because Mia told him that there's a kid called Toto in it, so he figures it's a good way of learning how to say his son's name without making it sound like Dorothy's dog. By the end of the film, he's bawling. Jimmy shows a scene to Norm, who drives the dump trucks with him. Asks if he's got the pronunciation of Toto right. Fucked if I know, mate. Norm follows it with advice Jimmy doesn't necessarily ask for. You owe her nothing. There's a suppressed rage in Norm's voice when he says the word her. She probably did it on purpose to get money from you. So remember that you're just as much a victim of this as she is. Not really, Jimmy wants to tell him. But the question of what he owes her is forever on his mind, even when he doesn't return to Sydney on his week off. They fly down to Brisbane, and Norm convinces him to stay and Jimmy's on a blinder, listening to advice from a man who's got 6 kids by 4 different women and refers to them as bitches and slags. In the middle of one of Norm's rants, Siobhan rings him, like she always does when she's pissed on a night out in London. "What are you doing, Jimmy?" she asks. He can hear the slur in her voice. At school she was a crying drunk, sleeping around with the wrong guys. Nowadays, everything seems to be on her terms, including sex and relationships. "Same as you, mate," he says. "Not the same as me, Jimmy. Go home." And because Norm starts up again, and Jimmy can't handle the mess of someone else's hate mixed with grog, he finds himself at the airport spending too much money on a last-minute ticket to Sydney. In the early hours of the morning, he wakes to a fight upstairs. Mackie and Tara aren't the arguing type, so it surprises him. They're not much into public displays of affection, nor do they talk each other up or live in their own world of relationship bliss. But Jimmy thinks they're solid most days. A couple of weeks back, he arrived late from hanging out at Frankie's, and they were lying on the couch with their feet in each other's faces, killing themselves laughing at something on TV. Jimmy sat with them and watched it, and couldn't for the life of him follow the humour. Frankie calls their house the Petersham Embassy. If they're not entertaining friends from East Timor, they're accommodating a couple of teachers from Kiribati who are trying to raise awareness about what's going on in some of the low-lying islands battling climate change in the Pacific. It's strangely believable that Mackie can switch from politics to sport to music in seconds while talking about the importance of letting wine breathe between courses. Later that morning, he watches from the front window, just to make sure they're okay. Most days, Tara takes a train and Mackie the bus. The usual practice is to stop at the front gate and exchange some sort of dialogue with their lips almost touching. Whatever takes place at the front gate seems sincere, and Jimmy's curious to find out what it is. Today's no different, but they seem tentative, and he figures attention is coming from Mackie. He's not the same as he was at school, moodier, easily frustrated. Back in 2005, his Uncle Joe died in the London bombings, and after 6 years, Mackie still carries it. Joe is a teacher, and Jimmy knows that Mackie's searching for the perfect teaching position because it has to mean something to him. He showers and heads off to Rosie's, rehearsing what he's going to say. Jimmy doesn't have much encouragement to go by, because she hasn't responded to any of the texts he's sent. At the house on Dalhousie Street, he rings the doorbell and waits. After a couple of minutes, he hears the sound of footsteps coming towards the door. Rosie doesn't seem surprised or impressed that he's there, but she lets him in wordlessly. He's relieved to see that she's not in her pyjamas. Doesn't realise until he's following her up the stairs that he's angry. "Where were you?" he asks. "Because I was worried and you can't just nick off without telling people." "Yes, I can." She's lost the vulnerability of a couple of weeks ago, and the heat between them during the floods is packed away someplace, because it would be reckless to let it out. Jimmy has to play differently with this version of Rosie. "Where were you?" he asks again. "I went to Tresillian." "Who?" "You gave me the number," she says, irritated. "You said these people might be able to help." Upstairs, he notices that the sunroom is tidy, cosy. She doesn't invite him to sit down. Instead, she picks up a few of the toys lying around and throws them into a big bright Elmo tub. When she bends, he can see down her top, and he feels like a perv because she's not wearing a bra and he can't look away. "Is Toto okay?" She rolls her eyes, probably at Jimmy's pronunciation. He's fine. "Can I see him?" "Why? So you can pull out a piece of his hair and check his DNA?" "I know he's mine, so let's not revisit that conversation." He follows her into the bedroom where Toto is standing up in a cot beside a lead-light window, clutching onto the rails and looking pleased with himself. He's different to the crying miserable baby of a few weeks ago, and the moment Toto sees Rosie, he bucks like crazy and his eyes light up. She picks him up and murmurs something to him and then puts him down on the floor. "Keep an eye on him," she says, disappearing into the ensuite. Toto manages to get himself up onto his feet, and Jimmy realises that he's learnt to walk these past couple of weeks. It's a tiptoeing sort of walk, and the kid's pleased with himself again, chuckling as he heads straight for Jimmy, who's used to people walking away. So he's hesitant when Toto gets too close, holds out a hand to steady him, but he doesn't let their fingers connect and the kid falls, surprised for a moment, before he picks himself up. There's a flush of the toilet and Rosie's out again, and Jimmy spends the next hour watching her with Toto, trying to steer his eyes away from her t-shirt every time she bends. He wants to ask her questions, but it's stilted between them, and he doesn't know how to break the ice. He doesn't know how to go back to that place where they were connected during the flood. "Do you want to go for a walk?" he asks. She doesn't answer, but disappears into her room and comes back in a different t-shirt. They venture out as Martha's walking into the house. There's a guy with her, about Martha's age, fit-looking, in long shorts and joggers. "Hey, Martha," Jimmy says. This is Rosie and Jimmy," she says. Jimmy holds up a hand in acknowledgement, but Rosie ignores them and keeps walking, pushing the pram past. She reaches the front door. "Bruno!" Bruno hurries after her, just in case Rosie's going to change her mind. The Ewan guy looks taken aback. "Wow, she's a charmer," he says to Martha. Outside, Jimmy catches up with Rosie. "You're on first-name terms with her, are you?" It's an accusation. "Martha was worried about you and—" "Don't involve yourself in stuff you know nothing about." "I know about being worried." Toto is shrieking out to anyone who passes them by, and an elderly lady with tight curls and drawn-on eyebrows tries to engage with him, but Rosie doesn't stop for anyone. "I think she wanted to see the baby. Do you know her?" "None of your business." She struggles at the lights with the pram and he helps her steer it back in place as they cross the road. "Can I do that?" he asks, indicating to the pram. "No." At Algae Park, she takes Toto out of his pram and puts him on the grass, which he seems to enjoy. Bruno's all over him and he loves that even more. Close by, a group of little girls are being trained in ball games and Toto is fascinated by the sound of their laughter. The kid is already a speedster and he goes tottering past Jimmy and falls. It's Rosie who picks him up and Jimmy can feel the accusation in her eyes. "Why are you here?" she asks, and he doesn't know how to respond, so the question goes unanswered. He visits Frankie and her family later because being with them is effortless. Not that Mackie and Tara's place isn't welcoming, but the shouting he heard during the night has unnerved him. Frankie's interviewing her grandmother, in the same way that she seems to be interviewing every Italian person over 70 that comes through the front door. She's talking PhDs and going down to Canberra to do some research at the National Museum, and they plan to go together on one of Jimmy's weeks off. He does the taxi driver rounds with her, dropping off both her nonnas and also Will's at the Leagues Club in Ashfield that puts on a seniors buffet every Tuesday night. Then they drive over to Darlinghurst and hang out at one of the cafes on Victoria Street until it's time for senior pickup. They're interrupted frequently. Frankie's worked in a couple of the bars up and down this strip and seems to know everyone. She's one of those people that the rest of the world genuinely wants to be around. It could be because she's beautiful, but Jimmy puts it down to her energy and warmth. Most of those who stop at their table ask about Will, and she uses the standard line, "He's thriving over there, doesn't want to come back." And then she laughs and asks them a plethora of questions. Jimmy's known her long enough to work out that Frankie's fascination for other people is also a way to fob off talking about herself. Since they left school, she's got herself a history degree and a master's, formed a band with Mackie and Justine, worked in pubs, made wedding dresses with her grandmother. Hard work has camouflaged her lack of direction and her anxiety. Jimmy was like that in high school, minus the hard work. Back then, he was perceived as a weirdo. Other kids were put off by the attention he paid them, but at least it stopped them asking questions about his life. "What do you and Will talk about every day?" he asks after someone puts a macchiato in front of her before she's even asked for it. "He'll have a short black," she says to the waitress. "Why do you ask?" "Because I can't understand how people fill their day with talk without it becoming empty." "Are you having trouble talking to her?" "At least they don't have to beat around the bush." He nods. While Will's there, he wants to know about everything here, people mostly. He keeps up with news and stuff online, but he misses family and our friends. He misses us. She gives him a look, and there's laughter in her eyes. "He'll never get over the Monaro." "Yeah, neither will I," he says, and then, "Is he thriving? Doesn't want to come back?" She doesn't respond for a moment, but he gets that look. He is thriving. He's making a shitload of money. He's making amazing connections, so he doesn't necessarily want to come back now. But she's annoyed again, like the last time they had a discussion about Will. "Do you know the worst thing about being in a relationship this long?" she asks. Jimmy shakes his head. Hasn't been in one long enough to know. "It's that everyone wants to talk about your relationship. They want to dissect it, speculate on whether it's run its course." "Why would they think that?" "Because according to the experts, relationships that begin at the end of high school last about 7 years. Most split up when they're about 23, 24. His coffee comes and she passes him the sugar. "I don't like being a stat," she says. "So let's get back to the lack of discussion between you and the baby mama." Jimmy would rather be speaking about her than himself. "She sort of shuts down conversation before it starts," he says. Nothing changes at Dalhousie Street for the rest of his time in Sydney. Sometimes Toto totters or crawls towards him and hands over a plastic block that's dripping with saliva. Every day they go for a walk down to Algae Park, and Jimmy asks Rosie if he can push the pram, and she barely acknowledges the request. It pisses him off. Jimmy doesn't want to spend the rest of his life on the back foot with Toto just because he was 1 year late. Is it a control thing? He asks her the day before he's due to fly out. They're on Ramsay Street and he doesn't want an argument outside the busiest bakery on the block, but he can't hold back. I can push a pram, you know. It's pretty obvious that you don't need a brain to do it, he says. Rosie puts the brakes on the pram and hands Toto a rusk to slobber over. At first, Jimmy thinks she's ignoring him, but then he gets a full impact of her stare. What are you, 5? She says. Ask me if you can hold him and I might say yes, because he's not going to remember who pushed him in a pram. He doesn't respond, and that seems to irritate her even more. All he wants is to be fed and held, and you can't even do that, and I don't get it because you were the most touchy-feely guy I ever came across, and I'm not, so he's got that from you. Toto drops the rusk, and Jimmy picks it up, but she snatches it from him and throws it in the bin, as if she doesn't even trust Jimmy to do that himself. At her place, he watches her struggle up the steps holding Toto, and once they're in the sunroom, Jimmy figures there's no use staying because the silence between them is too toxic. I've got to go, he says. See you in a week. He heads down the stairs to where Martha's sitting at the table, drinking tea and reading the paper. She glances up, and he must look like shit because she points to her mug, and instead of walking out, he nods. That guy, is he your boyfriend? He asks when he's sitting before her. Ewan. Martha looks up from what she's reading to think about it. We're flirting. He looks familiar. Sacked an RL coach. Who isn't these days? Such a pathetic game. She laughs again. Isn't it just? You're obviously not a fan. Nah, I like cars. It's the adrenaline. She gives him a look. Well, you've bred into the right family. The kettle sings and he gets up to make his own cup of tea. Can't help noticing the splashback. You know, I could do the grouting for you guys. It'll look amazing once you finish. I'm now officially on leave, so I'll get around to doing it myself. After a moment, Martha puts down what she's reading. Where did Rosie go? She asks, her voice low, and as if she's been waiting a while to ask. Tresillian? Does that make sense? She nods. It's a clinic to help mums with babies. At least she knows how to ask for help. He tops up her mug and they sit for a while talking about how FIFO works. He used to think it was a good perk, but flying in and out only gets him as far as Brisbane. Are you thinking of moving back here? She asks. He shakes his head. The money's too good. I'd never get that sort of pay here. You need to make this work, Jimmy, she says. He volunteers to go grocery shopping with Tara the next morning because Mackie trains his little cousin's soccer team on Saturdays. Jimmy hasn't spent much time with Tara without Frankie or Mackie around. Sort of knows her the least. At school she called him a dickhead a lot. Not out of affection either. She was a bit militant back then, perhaps as lonely as the rest of them. Jimmy's surrounded by women who won't let him take control of the wheels, because at Coles, Tara won't let him push the shopping cart. She has a system and is very particular about sticking to the grocery list she's holding. I don't do lists, he says. I'll just grab what I need. If I don't stick to a list, I go over our budget. Her tone is cold, abrupt. You're pissed off at me. I'm pissed off at you, she says. I'm sorry? We were expecting you on Saturday. Now, whenever you don't turn up, we think you'll disappear again. Frankie's good cop at the moment. We take turns. When is she bad cop? When Tom's being a dick? Was Tom being a dick the other night? The question surprises her. He doesn't know whether her reaction is because he overheard them or just that he's bringing it up. But throughout the whole toiletry aisle, she doesn't speak. The other night, Tom was having an anxiety attack, she finally says. And then he doesn't cope, and he gets even more agitated and goes for walks at 2 a.m, and that freaks me out because I think a group of drunks are going to king hit him on Stanmore Road, and as much as my heart is telling me not to shout at him, my mouth is saying, "Where the hell have you been?" Understandable. He glances at her, hoping he's not overstepping the mark. I miss the way Mackie was when we were at school. I do too, but I'm sort of more in love with this version of him. And that's the thing with Tara Fink. She can deliver sincerity in such a practical way. Dating is the fun part, she tells him. Living together is complicated. It means that when he doesn't speak, for the whole morning you're wondering if everything's okay. When you're dating, by the time he drives over in the morning, he's worked everything out. You good with him? He feels the intense study again. And that surprises you? He laughs. Yeah, actually it does. The same way it surprises me that Siobhan can dish out good advice when she used to be the worst at taking it. Tara focuses on handing over the groceries in order of how she wants them packed. I jumped the dating part, he finds himself saying. I just got her pregnant and you can't go backwards from that. The chance is gone, you know. Would you have liked to have dated her? He hands over cash as she's taking out her Visa card to stop her from paying. I thought I had it all worked out, he tells her. I've been saving for ages and I figured I had another year, then I could come back here and apply to the paramedics. It's a 3-year course and I wouldn't be making much on a base wage, but I'd have a profession, you know, for once in the history of my family, both sides. They're not bad people, they're just so fucking useless, that's all. Jimmy, I don't know how to be a father, he interrupts, and he can't understand why he's admitting it to Tara. So that means I'm just like the rest of the people I come from. I don't know how to be anything but a big disappointment in someone's life. He takes a shopping trolley and they start walking. She's given you a way in, Tara says after a while. What's her name? Rosie. And she didn't have to. Take it. I don't think that kid is going to have a better life because he has a father, Jimmy. I think he's going to have a better life because he has you. Jimmy thinks Tara's just crossed into good cop territory. Don't ask me to explain a compliment, she says briskly. And her words take him back to Dalhousie Street. Martha lets him in and he says sorry for disturbing her again and goes upstairs to where Rosie is bathing Toto. The bathroom lad is crap and she looks even more beat. He doesn't know whether she's a good mum or not. But what he does know is that she loves the baby. Toto's at least happy to see Jimmy because he smiles in that twisted, crazy halo way. I have held one of those, Jimmy tells her. I was with Kev the day after the water went down. We got access to that area beyond the mill and we found him. That baby. And Kev had a meltdown and I just picked him up, this little thing. And he was so cold and I can't forget how it felt and I don't want to touch ours, because he deserves better than hands that held a dead baby. Jimmy sees Rosie's eyes water and he knows she hasn't forgotten anything about that town. She reaches out and grabs a towel that's sitting on the sink. My father believed in signs, she says. Not that they change events or predict what's going to happen. It's more about what we do when we come across one. She removes Toto from the bath and wraps him in the towel. I was going to have an abortion, you know. And the night before I was booked to have one, I had a dream. Not of my mother or my father or anyone telling me anything profound. Her eyes meet his and she's trying not to cry. I dreamt of the flood and of the town, and I dreamt that someone found that baby alive. I don't know who it was, except that Min was holding him. She looks at Toto, who loves the attention. Post-clinic Toto seems to love everything. Honestly, I know what everyone thinks. That I'm like any other dropkick who has a baby because at least then there'll be someone out there who loves them. But the dream was a sign. I felt it here. she says, pointing to her heart. So you're wrong if you think your hands only held death. And she holds Toto out to him, and Jimmy takes his son. Chapter 7. Rosie has nowhere she needs to be. 5 minutes into a job interview at the nursing home, she walks out. It makes her regret the money she spent, keeping Toto in the council-run occasional daycare for 2 hours, although she's relieved to have found a place that only charges $10 an hour. Her plan is to find a job that can offer her a couple of shifts a week, and then she'll add on from there. But 5 minutes into the interview, she picks up her bag and says, "I'm out of here." She's walking out of the grounds when she spots a guy Martha's been hanging out with on the front veranda of the house for the past couple of weeks. Rosie can hear everything from her window. It's nauseating to listen to, but she knows everything about him. The latest is that his father has had a fall, and it's become obvious to everyone that he can't stay at home. It's turned Erwin, or whatever his name is, into even more of a misery guts. She'll never understand why people whinge about their parents getting old and all the things that come with it. Rosie would give anything to push her mother and father around in a chair. She wouldn't care if they were dribbling and didn't know who she was, or if they pissed their pants every morning and every night. The woman in the interview asked her why she was interested in working with old people, someone as young as her. She didn't say her real reason, because no one in her family except for Nonna Eugenia got to grow old. Today, he's pushing a guy in a wheelchair who is obviously his father, and they're coming towards her and she's about to look down and ignore them. But then she doesn't, because of the way he brushes the old man's cheek with the back of his hand, with an affection that makes Rosie's eyes water. "Can I give you some advice?" she says. It takes him a moment to recognise her. "Rosie, is it?" he asks. She nods and goes to speak, but he stops her. "Look, I don't want to get involved in whatever this is between you and Martha because you need to sort it." She holds up a hand to shut him up. "I don't like it here," she tells him. "Regardless of whether your father remembers you, it doesn't mean he's given up on feeling anything. If he stays at this place, he'll die sooner. I've seen it happen. There are better homes." He looks taken aback. "Like where?" Rosie likes the fact that he's asked, and she names a few, but then gets pissed off. "Just do your research and don't be so frickin' lazy." His phone rings and he answers it. Rosie moves his father's chair before heading off, because the sun is directly in the old guy's eyes. She gets a haircut next, seeing as she's paid for 2 hours of daycare, stares at herself in the mirror and contemplates her instructions for the girl it just cuts. Rosie doesn't have one of those elfin faces that look fantastic with cropped hair, because she took after her father and everything about her face is too pronounced. But she's got good skin, courtesy of her mum. So she goes for a buzz cut. Later, when she picks up Toto, his hands go straight to it, chuckling, and the daycare girls laugh at the sound. They love Toto, and that's going to be Rosie's yardstick in life. She'll love anyone who loves her son. On the way home, her phone beeps, a message, and her heart leaps for an instant, and it's how she knows. It's a Pavlov's dog thing. The only person who texts her is SES Jesus, so the instant euphoria at the sound of the buzz spells trouble. He's texted her once or twice during the week, wants to know how Toto's doing, so she sends a photo, wants to know how she's doing. "You okay?" Rosie's trying to have a guy-free year, just to prove to herself that she can. She's surprised that she misses talking, most of all because she didn't date many guys who were chatty. But he was. Not as much anymore. She decides not to respond to texts, asking how she is, because then Rosie will end up sleeping with this guy and him being Toto's father is tricky. She can't go around screwing up that situation. He needs to be Toto's father above everything else. When he flew in last week, it was a bit less awkward than the last time. He couldn't keep his eyes off Toto, laughed when he saw him totter around on tiptoes. Rosie tells herself that she loves his laugh because it reminds her of Toto, but then she remembers the Pavlov's dog thing and realises it's because she's got a thing for this guy. It'll be sort of sad when he works out that the rest of the world can walk by the time they're one, she had said. No, let him go on thinking he's special. And Rosie could tell that no one had ever told Jimmy he was special. She tries to stay upbeat despite unsuccessful interviews, because there are moments with Toto that make Rosie feel euphoric. The unconditional love from him, and the way his face lights up when he sees her. But there's always something to crush the joy. At a cafe in Roselle, where she's getting a latte, Rosie notices two of the women from the mothers group. Yolanda the megamouth, and the Chinese girl who never said a word. Rosie's not interested in being seen, so she turns the pram, accidentally blocks the entrance, and gets the huffing and puffing sound annoying people make when they don't have the guts to say, "Get out of the bloody way." Rosie refuses to move, which sort of causes a scene. It means Yolanda and the other ones spot her. Suddenly the two are on their feet, shoving their prams between patrons to reach her. "For your information, what you did was rude," Yolanda says. Rosie has no idea what she's done to them, but she's trying to get out of Pramageddon to avoid scaring the babies. And then someone comes up behind them and gets all hot and bothered because now 3 prams are in the way. "Oh, shut up," the Chinese girl says. They sit in the park with their takeaway coffees because the owner of the cafe bans them from coming back in. The other one's name is Tess, and what the 3 of them have in common, apart from babies and prams, is that they were all shunned by the mothers group. Secret Service Katerina stopped posting on the Facebook page, so I figured we were all meeting at the community centre, Yolanda says. But Tess was the only one there. "Let's not talk about them again." Tess gives their daughter a very sensible snack out of colour-coded containers. Toto's hoeing into a not-so-sensible chocolate chip muffin. "They weren't the type of people I'd ever want to hang out with anyway, so I'm angry at myself for caring." "Yeah, just because we push babies out of our vag doesn't mean we have anything in common," Yolanda says, going after her daughter, who's a future sprinter for sure. Both baby girls have been walking for months, and Toto tries to follow them every time, but falls on his face. Rosie notices that they say words as well, while Toto is all sounds and gibberish. She worries he's going to be the last baby to do everything. Knows it's her fault for doing it all wrong. She wrests the muffin from between his fingers because he's heading for the sandpit. "That pram's going to kill you," Yolanda tells her as they move their stuff over to the pit. "There's an Inner West Mums page on Facebook where you can get a better one for a good price." "Rosie's not on Facebook," Tess says. She seems to have picked up a lot of information during Mother's Group, despite her silence. She's from Wagga and worked in HR for the council there, but her husband was offered a town planner job for Leichhardt Council, so they decided to move. "Are there many Chinese people in Wagga?" Rosie asks, politely. "I have no idea," Tess says. "My family's Vietnamese." Rosie avoids Yolanda's stare. She can imagine how loaded it is with disapproval. Yolanda's also from the country, and Rosie makes a point to remember how to say Camilleri because Yolanda speaks about being part of that nation. She talks about being homesick for family and how lonely it is in the city, and Tess agrees. Rosie wants to tell them that she's from the city, but just as homesick for family and lonely. "Where's your mob from?" Yolanda asks. "I have a grandmother in Italy," Rosie says. There's no response after that. As if it's her fault for not having enough family to fill the silence. The wind has picked up, and both Tess and Yolanda remove baby puffer jackets out from the bottomless pits of their bags. "Your bub needs to be in layers now that it's getting cold," Yolanda says. Toto's sucking on his muffin mixed with sand-covered fingers. "At least he's not crying anymore," Tess says, handing Rosie a wipe. "I took him to Tresillian." "What was the problem?" "Back molars," Rosie says. "So I guess it's an I told you so, Yolanda." Yolanda is instantly pissed off. "You don't know anything about me, so don't presume I'm going to say that." "I know enough." "No, you don't." "Bet you're a teacher." Yolanda stares at Rosie. She's only a couple of years older, but has a look in her eye that belongs to someone who's 50. "You do sound like one, Yolanda," Tess says. "And in saying that, I loved all of mine." Yolanda teaches PE, which is why she wanted to slap Cardio Mum across the face every time she gave out dangerous training advice. She's also the oldest of 23 cousins, so she's used to dishing out the threats and advice. "Are you on your own?" she asked Rosie. "No, sort of." Yolanda takes out her phone. "Give me your number." Rosie gives it to her, and a moment later the phone rings in her bag. Just in case. She starts cooking again. Tonight, Martha's out at her middle-aged netballers training night, so it feels good to have the kitchen to herself, and Rosie makes some of the dishes her mum taught her. Caponata sugo parmigiana. She figures if she freezes it all, they can live on it for the next month or so. Jimmy's back in Sydney, and he fixes the high chair Rosie found outside someone's house for council pickup. When he's done with the chair, he gives it a good clean and fits Toto into it. In the past couple of weeks, he's fixed the cot railing that never worked because Rosie bought it second-hand on Gumtree, as well as a mini mover with a wonky wheel. He's functional, and Rosie hasn't come across a functional guy since her father. When Jimmy doesn't have furniture to fix, he stands around in that fidgety way, as if he doesn't know how to take it easy around her. Rosie puts a plate of caponata close to where he's standing at the breakfast bar. He points to himself, and she just ignores him. Goes back to soaking the breadcrumbs for the meatballs. He sits down and starts eating, reaches out for the bread so he can wipe the plate clean like some sort of peasant. He knows the food, and she figures it's the Italian best friend connection. "Can we talk about money without it being awkward?" he says, picking up Toto's water bottle for the 4th time. Toto thinks it's a game and Jimmy lets him play. "I'm on a pension," she tells him, and he shakes his head. No pension." She puts down the mince she's rolling and she washes her hands because she needs to be focused. "It's not really your decision," she tells him. "I can give you money every week," he says. "You don't have to be on a pension." Let's keep it uncomplicated. His stare is unrelenting. She can tell he's trying to rein something in. "I come from 4 generations of handouts," he finally says. "I don't want him being part of that cycle. And I come from hard workers, so he'll be taken care of, don't worry. You're making this about you. And you're not?" The mood is broken only by the water bottle on the ground again. Rosie picks it up before Jimmy does and puts it in the sink. Toto's unimpressed and starts howling. "I don't want to sit around every week waiting for you to give me money," she says. "It'll mean I owe you something." He stands up abruptly, and she thinks he's going to leave. "If you're suggesting what I think you are, I don't work that way. You owe me nothing." He unbuckles Toto from the high chair and puts him in the mini mover. And Rosie can't believe he's giving in to Toto so easily. "I don't like borrowing money," she says. "I don't like owing money. The moment I start working, I won't need the pension." "No one's judging you, Rosie." "What would you know?" she says. "I grew up in this area, everyone's judging me. If it's Martha, don't bring up Martha as if she's your best mate." Toto's ramming the mini mover into every piece of furniture he can find and laughing with the delight that comes with noise and destruction. "He's going to be a rev head," Jimmy says, and he laughs, and there's that part of Toto again, the part that makes Rosie a little sad because it means her son doesn't completely belong to her anymore. Jimmy looks up and she sees a flash of something in his eyes, and it makes her wonder if his heart leaps when she texts him. When he says goodbye to Toto, he presses a kiss to his brow. It's the first time Rosie's seen intimacy between the two. "I like your hair, by the way," he says at the door. She shrugs. It's easier this way. But she's lying because a haircut makes her feel cool in a way that she hasn't felt for a long time. She's run out of containers to store the last of the pasta, so she puts it on a plate and covers it with foil. Martha comes home and Rosie can hear murmuring at the front door. Coach Winger must be out there with her. He's nothing like her dad, who never complained a day in his life. Rosie stays in the kitchen and waits, because she needs to get the business side of things sorted out. Finding out that money was owing on the house was a game changer. "How much are the mortgage payments?" she asks when Martha finally walks into the kitchen. Martha makes a sound of disbelief and shakes her head before putting her head in the fridge. "Where's my couscous salad?" "I chucked it. It was stinking out the fridge." Rosie shoves the foil plate towards her because Martha can't cook to save her life, and Rosie doesn't want to see food go to waste. "Once I'm working, I'm paying my share," she says, before heading upstairs. Despite buzz cuts and cooking, the pit of loneliness becomes bigger. She thinks of Jimmy living with friends or soaking his bread around a noisy kitchen table. She watches people in their workplaces, laughing as they make lattes and dish out panini. Everyone seems to know each other except for Rosie. She thinks it'll change soon, but she can't see the signs. She goes for another interview and knows it's the sort of place she could like. So when they ring to tell her that they were impressed, but gave the job to a uni student who is studying occupational therapy, she stops believing that she'll get out of this rut. Stops telling herself that she's luckier than most because she's got this house. Sees herself as one of those girls who will always be dependent on someone. At the UTS Student Centre, she highlights the questions on the application form that she needs to go back to. Lachlan is there to help with a few of them, but most of the others mean she has to search for her school records and official documentation, and that's easier said than done. He asks if she wants to have a coffee, and they head over to the marketplace food court. She organises some fruit for Toto and lets Lachlan buy the coffee and sushi. "I think it's impressive what you're doing," he says, glancing down at Toto. Rosie's never been described as impressive, maybe beautiful and pretty, but however he's dressed it, Rosie's been paid a compliment, and she likes it. Being turned on by one can't be a bad thing. Better than being turned on by an insult. "Can I have your number?" he asks. "No," she says. "It's nothing personal, but I don't want to be tiptoeing into the student centre just because you didn't ring me, as if I did something wrong." "Okay," he says, and then he laughs as if he's processing it. "How about if you say your number out loud and it won't feel as if you've given it to me?" "Same thing," she says, "and you won't remember it anyway, and then you'll use that as an excuse." "I have a 98.9% success rate when it comes to keeping promises and honouring conditions," Lachlan says. "The 1.1% failure mostly revolves around returning library books." She can't help smiling. "And I've got a great memory for numbers, so try me." The next morning, Rosie pushes the pram out onto the street and sees Teresa watering the plants. She's a hairdresser who now runs her business at home, so she and her 15-year-old daughter, Bianca, always look like they've literally stepped out of a salon. Rosie is about to ignore the greeting that she knows is coming, but the words come out of her mouth before she can stop them. "I don't want to sit in your kitchen because it'll make me too sad." Because it will haunt Rosie with the smell of coffee and the memory of dialect and emphatic gestures. Teresa and Rosie's mum weren't just neighbours. They had been best friends from the moment Rosie's parents moved into the dump next door. As a kid, Rosie remembered often walking to Ramsay Street with them, both women perved on by men driving by. Teresa folds a hose to stop the water. "Can I at least hold him, Bella?" While Teresa has a cuddle, Rosie's phone beeps and she fumbles for it. She reads a message and it gives her hope because today she has a place she needs to be. "Do you guys want to get kicked out of another cafe?" Chapter 8. We do the garden last, Martha. At the house on Dalhousie Street, there's a lawn and then there's the beyond. The beyond is what lies at the bottom of the backyard. It's a vegetable patch gone feral, now sprouting capsicums off the side of the house, tangled with every shrub, creeper and weed known to existence, roots entwined deep and tight, a mockery of humans' belief that they had some sort of dominance over nature. Martha rejects every quote, stunned by the costs involved in taming it. Deep down, she knows it's not about the money. Ever since her argument with Rosie about the property, she's imagined Seb's voice, remembered those nights when they'd lie in bed talking about the house, always the house. "It never gets sold, Martha. We finish the garden, and that night we sit in the banana chairs and we wait for the solar lights to come on and we say basta. Next time we move is when they put us in the ground. Basta. Enough." The taming of the beyond will be the completion of Seb Gennaro's dream. He had never told Martha much about his life before coming to this country, but she knew it was a less romanticised version than that of the older Italians in the area who had migrated in the 50s. Seb would say with great bitterness that there was no future tense in the Sicilian language, and little wonder. Back in the 80s, he would have done anything to take Loredana away from the housing project and the crime they had grown up with in a place called San Filippino Neri on the outskirts of Palermo. Deep down, Martha figures he had the anything, although she never discovered what that was. Seb was a version of Martha's own father, who never looked back. One changed the spelling of his name, the other bought into a dream of owning something in his life, despite it being a hovel. When he first showed Martha photos of what the property looked like when he had bought it, they were still strangers outside the cancer ward of the RPA. She couldn't quite believe that houses like that had still existed in Sydney back in the 90s. No inside toilet and one livable room, he told her, but still better than any place he or Loredana had lived their entire lives. And now she's breaking a promise to him. Martha's made a couple of calls to local real estate agents to get an idea of where they stand. Today's agent is all bright-eyed excitement, until she looks out at the beyond. "You're going to have to do something about that before you put it on the market," she says. "Do you want to go inside and talk?" "I don't have time," Martha says. "I've got to be somewhere." It's Saturday, and Martha and the women have their first netball game. It's a loss, but not dismal, and they're pretty impressed with themselves. Ewan isn't. "You lost," he says, his tone blunt. "Do you think a footy player would be cheering about that score?" "Fuck off, Ewan," Elizabeth says. "Can't we just celebrate not getting carried away on stretchers?" She's brought along her 21-year-old doppelganger daughter. One expression fits all. Louise King spends the entire game sitting on the sideline with a hoodie over her head. "Can I put an end to your celebration of averageness?" Ewan says, "and ask that you take this seriously?" He walks away and there's plenty of muttering. "He's struggling," Julia tells them. The team do that thing where they say goodbye next to Julia and Alana's car, but spend the next 40 minutes talking. Martha finds herself telling the others about the house and its beyond, and Rosie and the baby and Jimmy Haler, who looks like he should be in jail, but who took care of her after she had the dog put down. "And she forgot Greek Easter," Sophie says. "How the hell could you avoid seeing 10,000 Greeks bearing crucifixes in a procession?" "That's an exaggeration, Elizabeth." "Excuse me? St. Spiridion? The cops closed down Gardeners Road, Sophie." "If you say this Jimmy guy's a local, I'll ask around," Alana volunteers. "You won't know him." "Trust me, she's a chairbull. Alana will find a degree of separation," Julia says, getting into the car. "Drinks Wednesday night?" Elizabeth suggests, and there's another 20-minute discussion at the car window about where they should go. Later, while Martha's looking out at the beyond, wearing her brand new gardening gloves, Ewan texts her to say he's at the front door, and she heads out to see him. "Are you over your tantrum?" she asks. "Am I the only person who takes a team seriously?" he wants to know. "I take it seriously," she says. "Just not the competition." "You want to go for a drive?" he asks. "Where's your father?" "A mate's taking him down to the club to watch the game." "You don't want to watch the game?" "Not this one," he says. On Cronulla Beach, they watch the die-hard surfers sit and wait for the perfect wave. More silence. Up until now, the list of Ewan Healy traits had been positive, apart from a touch of grumpiness and the fact that he can't remember the song they danced to. But now she has to head the negative list with the word moody. Martha's history with moody people began with Julia Healy in high school, an irritating, self-indulgent trait that always had her walking on eggshells until she got to an age where eggshell walking didn't appeal to her. "My father used to take me here for training," he finally says. "One minute we'd be doing wind sprints up those sand dunes, and next he'd tell me to get in the water, no matter how cold, and I'd hit the waves crying, praying that he didn't notice." Did he? Who knows? He'd never say anything. Later we'd sit on the rocks and discuss John Healy's version of the meaning of life. "I'm going to say no thanks to that baptism of male nonsense," she says. "If you want my version of the meaning of life, let's do it over a Resh's." He laughs. She glances at him, takes in the solidness of his shoulders and the power in his hands. She wants to hold them because they seem to promise something that sort of thrills her, It's what she remembers from their time in the backseat of his Hilux after Charlie's funeral. But there's a part of him that's been diminished by the sacking, and she doesn't know if she can take that on board, because she can feel herself slipping towards something dark within herself that she hasn't felt before, mocking her for thinking that she could survive the death of her mother and Seb and even Charlie, who had made her workday bearable without hurting an inch of her soul. "Is your team playing tonight?" she asks. "Is that why you're not with your dad?" "They're not my team," he says. She figures he's not ready to talk about it. Perhaps he can't. Last she heard, it was tied up in legals. She shivers from a touch of ice in the wind, and he shuffles closer and places an arm around her. "Nothing worse than a public sacking," he finally says. Jules and Alana blame the club. "I have to take some of the blame, but it still pisses me off. 5 losses in a row. And then everyone forgets that you almost got them to the minor premiership twice in 4 years, and the next minute you're hearing about the club deciding your future on the morning news." Do you know what Lottie Newman would have said? "Durchschauen wird man Glück." A bad experience brings wisdom. "I don't feel wise at all, just pissed off most of the time." "So what next?" He sighs. "Options." "How can options be a bad thing, Ewan?" "Because the best offers come from the UK," he says. "The next best are for being part of the coaching team for the Warriors or a developmental role with the Cowboys." He looks at her. That's how options can be a bad thing. Martha meets a guy she could remotely be interested in dating and is either off to England, New Zealand or Townsville. "What would Lottie Newman say to that?" he asks. "Because listening to you speak German is strangely exciting me." "Really? I actually know all the words to 99 Luftballons, if you want me to sing." Even more of a turn on. She laughs, but then thinks of Lottie and it makes her sad. "Ach du lieber Gott. My mother was an oh my god sort of person." You miss her? How can Martha even try to answer that? She's reminded of Lottie every single day. When she goes into the IGA at Haberfield, they play Lottie's radio station, and either Petula Clark is belting out Downtown or the Seekers are singing I'll Never Find Another You. Next door, she'll see the affection between Teresa and Bianca, and she'll remember walking to school with Lottie, arm in arm. It was the way they'd stroll together for the rest of her mother's life. Lottie was a joy, although damaged by her childhood in the war, with its constant evacuations and bombs and death. She'd hoard groceries in the cupboard just in case, was frightened by authority, and had nightmares all her life. Lottie wasn't overly religious, but when she was dying she promised Martha that she'd be her Schutzengel, her guardian angel. "Okay, I've changed my mind," she says to Ewan, standing up, stripping down to her undies and singlet, and racing for the ocean before she can talk herself out of it, has regrets the moment she hits the water, sobs from the shock of icy waves hitting in her face, and the only way she can stop her teeth chattering from the pain of it all is by screaming. And she doesn't want to stop because the ocean is swallowing up the sound, and it gives her a freedom beyond words to do something she hasn't been able to do inside her house or out on the street or anywhere else in the world. Ewan at least follows her out into the surf, and she feels his arms clasped around her, much like his father. If he notices her crying, he doesn't say. But afterwards he gets her dry and they lie huddled on the sand together in their clothes minus underwear. "You know we're entering that age bracket where pneumonia can kill us," he says. "I never listened to stats about people our age," she says. "And you didn't have to follow me in. I figured there was 0 chance of me making progress with you if I stayed put." She looks at him. Progress was made, my friend. And they lie there glued to each other because the wind's now cruel, but his arm around her feels good. "What are you thinking?" she asks. "Frankie Goes to Hollywood's The Power of Love, or Foreigners, I Want to Know What Love Is," he answers. Wrong decade, so not even close. Outside the house, she doesn't see the point in putting him through any more grief. She doesn't care who's upstairs in her home, her room that she shared with Seb, his room that he shared with Loredana in some shape or form before the renovation. If Martha could make love to a man with a photo of his dead wife in his wallet, she can make love to another man with a photo of her dead husband on the mantelpiece. She takes his hand, and they're about to head inside when a taxi pulls up in front of Teresa and Marco's place. The driver removes a suitcase from the boot and a woman gets out, in her 60s, but with a walk that most women seem to leave behind in their 40s. And it's not until she's dragging the bag towards them that it hits Martha. She feels Ewan flinch, not realising until then that her fingers are digging into his arm. "Martha?" he asks. And then she's here on Martha's veranda, and under the harsh light she looks older. Grey, coarse, long hair and kohl-rimmed dark eyes. She begins talking at Martha, and it's rapid and blunt. Martha doesn't understand a word, but she gets the nucleus of the conversation. With shaking hands, she unlocks the door, steps aside, and lets her in. "Rosanna!" It's a raspy voice, scraped out of a throat that smoked thousands of cigarettes in her lifetime. Martha hears the quick footsteps down the stairs, sees Rosie there with the baby in her arms, stunned at first and then bawling. Rosie's a silent crier, always has been, and she's perfected the art of expressing gut-wrenching emotion without uttering a sound. And shit, she looks young. Martha watches as rough hands grab Rosie's face, kissing her, grabbing the baby, who is staring wide-eyed at all the drama unfolding around him, and then he's laughing with glee because whichever side he takes after, this kid will be attracted to Bedlam. Rapid Sicilian bounces off the walls, and Rosie's grabbing the suitcase, dragging it down the corridor, scratching the hell out of Martha's floorboards, thump, thump, thumping all the way up the stairs, while the woman wails out a song to the baby, who bucks to the beat of its mayhem. "What just happened?" Ewan asks. Martha can't respond for a moment. The woman's emotion at the front door was potent, and all she could understand were two names, Rosanna and Loredana. "Eugenia." "Who?" "Seb's mother-in-law." "Staying in your house? Why?" "Because Martha may be living on less than 200 square metres, but Seb's mother-in-law is going to make sure that Rosie gets her share." "I'm sorry, but I don't think you staying is a good idea," she says. Ewan is still holding her hand, and he gently pulls her closer. "How can sleeping with me under the same roof as your husband's mother-in-law not be a good idea?" he asks. She laughs because she's about a microsecond away from crying. "Come home with me," he says. "You don't need this shit." She shakes her head, but thanks for asking. The next morning, Seb's mother-in-law is in the kitchen, looking surprised to see Martha up so early, as if it's her home already and Martha's the intruder. There's another serving to be had from Eugenia, this time in a hissed, hushed voice. "I don't understand," Martha says. Although she understands enough, they want her house. Seb's mother-in-law is pointing upstairs, talking at Martha until furious tears well up in the older woman's hard, wild eyes. "It's my house as well, Eugenia." Eugenia doesn't give a shit who else owns a house. She just keeps on talking until Martha has had enough and walks back into her bedroom, locking the door. Later, when she hears the front door slam and footsteps and banging against furniture, she ventures out again and sees Rosie and her baby in the kitchen. Martha can't hold back any longer, even though there's a smidgen of guilt that it's the happiest she has ever seen Rosie. "I'm not going to be bullied out of this house by your grandmother." Rosie stares up at her, annoyed, dismissive. "You're a paranoid psycho, Martha. My nonna's come to see Toto and me, and it's not always about you." That night, Seb's mother-in-law decides that upstairs is too confined for her and takes up residence in the kitchen, not cooking, because Rosie tends to do that, but it's where the older woman claps loud, out-of-tune Sicilian songs to the baby, who crashes his little Tykes SUV from one piece of furniture to another in time with the music. When Rosie leaves the next morning, Eugenia goes for another round with Martha, demanding something from her that Martha hasn't quite worked out. To get out of the house? To sell? God forbid to let them stay indefinitely? And as the days pass, Eugenia and her presence spread from the kitchen to the living area where Toto, a Damien from The Omen child, has found more corners to crash into. Martha's place of solace becomes the exact opposite, while Eugenia's power spills out into the Dalhousie street. If she's not talking to Marco and Teresa over the fence, as though they're long-lost friends, she's taking Signora de Lorenzo from the house on the corner for a walk around the neighbourhood with Bruno the dog, and Rosie sulking behind her with the pram. There's bad blood between Rosie and Signora. But now that Eugenia's here, procession passing Martha's house looks like a Michelangelo Antonioni film, headed by a dog. Martha's now familiar with his work after moving away from Romanian films to Italian existential cinema. "Martha!" Teresa calls out. "Come over for a coffee tomorrow." "I've got a lot on my plate, Teresa," Martha says, her tone brisk. Her neighbour looks a bit taken aback. Martha doesn't care, because it should be Teresa who feels guilty. Martha was her friend first, not Eugenia. 4 nights into Eugenia's reign on Dalhousie Street, Martha needs space and finds herself driving to Ewan's townhouse in Drummoyne. "You okay?" he asks when he opens the door to her. And Martha wonders when kindness became an aphrodisiac. If it's an age thing, she'll embrace it with open arms. She's comforted to know that she does have a place to go to, because tonight she doesn't want to be sleeping in her house. She's about to let him know he's going to get lucky when she sees a wheelchair out on the back veranda. "Your dad's here," she says. He nods. "We packed up his things and I'm moving him over to the nursing home tomorrow." "How's Julia taking it?" she asks. "The kids are upset." He nods, and she can see he's trying to contain himself, his eyes well up. "John played a big part in them coming to live with Jules and Alana, and we don't think they understand most of this." "They've come out of the system. They probably understand more than you think." He steps back, inviting her in. She shakes her head. "You need to be with your dad." Sophie's husband George is kind enough to sleep in the spare room, and lying beside her reminds Martha of being 13, when they'd have sleepovers and talk about the evil Julia Healy and Elizabeth King. "Why did we hate them so much in first form?" Sophie asks. "Because they were racist bitches back then? Remember Elizabeth called you Sophie Souvlaki and me SS Martha?" "True. Do you think Elizabeth's punishment is the weirdo daughter?" Martha asks. "I think bad karma's visited her more than once." Back in the 90s, Elizabeth King was a girl most likely to run the country, and married a banker from the UK who worked in futures. Martha was long out of their lives by then, but Sophie had been invited to one of the couple's extravaganzas, and even though Sophie was a party girl back then, she opted out of going to any others. Another world, she had told Martha, a bad one. In 2000, Elizabeth's husband seemed to drop off the radar, and Sophie and Martha had speculated about what happened to him over the years. No one seemed to know. Whatever the truth, it forced Elizabeth back into her parents' home in Croydon with 2 young kids, working as a buyer for DJs. "I think Elizabeth wants Louise to join the team," Sophie says. "That'll bring a burst of joy to our lives." Sophie takes the remote from her. "Gilmore Girls or Breaking Bad?" There are options. No one in between Lorelai and Walter. Scarlett gets into bed with them, and they watch a collection of 1-minute films she's made using an app on her mum's phone. Martha's favourite belongs to the horror genre, starring the family cavalier, and it makes her laugh until she has tears in her eyes. Another reason she loves Sophie. Despite waiting forever, Sophie and George managed to produce one of Martha's favourite people of all time. "If anyone ever calls this one Scarlett Souvlaki, I'll smash them in the face," she tells Sophie. "That's such a lovely thing to say, Martha." She gets home the next day at midday, and within minutes Teresa is out front. "Can we talk, Martha?" Martha bristles. "I don't know what Eugenia's been telling you, Teresa, but it's no one's business except Rosie's and mine." Teresa's usually animated face looks pained. "This is hard for me, Martha, but it has to be done. So let me translate, and I promise I'll go back inside my house and not interfere again." Martha's front door opens, and Eugenia is there, barking out demands to Teresa for translation. There's contempt in Seb's mother-in-law's eyes that Martha doesn't recognise from any of that generation. Her own mother and Alana's and Sophie's were strict, but devoted and warm. Seb had alluded to his mother-in-law's reputation in the neighbourhood, but he respected her, She lacked hypocrisy and malice, but he warned that he wouldn't want to cross her. Eugenia wants Rosie... Martha cuts her off. I've lived next door to you for 6 years, Teresa, and you've seen how much work I've done on this house. So for you to come to my house and take their side... Teresa is close to tears. It's not what you think, Martha. And I really didn't want to do this at your front door, but Eugenia's come a long way and I respect that. She's lost a mother, a daughter, and 2 sisters to cancer, and she can't seem to convince Rosie to have a checkup because Rosie won't be told anything these days. Eugenia wants you to take her granddaughter to the breast clinic and make sure everything's okay, because if something happens to Rosie, they'll have to put Eugenia in the ground with her. Martha feels Eugenia's stare, meets it. She knows it's how you lost your mother and that you'd understand, Teresa adds. Martha nods, because she can't speak, and then Teresa is embracing her, and Martha doesn't want to let go. Marco and I are worried about you, Bella. With the arrival of Eugenia, the ghost of her daughter, Loredana, joins Lottie in waking Martha up in the morning. Forza, Martha. Martha has never sensed Loredana in this house before, but she's imagined her languorous walk down Dalhousie, chatting to every second person outside their home, as they watered their plants or collected their mail. That husky, strong accent attracting the foreigners, the rapid musical dialect comforting the old-timers. Seb and Loredana may have been on their own out here, but the upside was that it freed them from the angst most people in this neighbourhood had at the hands of in-laws and relatives. In the cancer ward, Loredana had been indifferent to Martha, but she bewitched Lottie with her charisma and disregard for hospital rules, even when they were dying. More than once, Martha would find them giggling together. She was jealous of that, maybe more than the fact that Loredana was Seb's first wife. And here they both are in Martha's ear, and together they are a force to be reckoned with. So she ventures outside to the beyond, finds Seb's mother-in-law hacking at the triffids. When Eugenia sees Martha, she calls out, explaining what needs to be done. Not that Martha understands a word, but it's all in the tone and gestures. Eugenia holds out the sickle. Forza, Martha. And it's how Martha and Seb's mother-in-law spend their days, hacking at years of failed gardening and talking to each other in a language that the other doesn't understand. Once or twice, Rosie watches them suspiciously from her window, and Eugenia murmurs something to Martha. Yes, what a little shit, Martha says in return, and Eugenia laughs as if she knows exactly what Martha said.
This is the end of CD 3. The book continues on CD 4.